see it's getting darker and darker, and there's just no way right now for these drivers to know exactly what's going to happen.
These guys are going to have to be really, really careful and tiptoe around the track until it's either not even 10 minutes into this race, and I feel like we've got enough strategy going on for a whole event, but still a long, long way to go.
There's Yellowstone, there's Yosemite, but for racing fans and for Grid Life's Elkhart Classic, the destination is Road America, the National Park of Speed. Free ride in the front of the field here. Look at Emil Tab up the inside for the race lead. We head down to the first corner.
And these guys have no idea what they're coming into. Look at this field. They're 2 wide, 3 wide, a couple places slipping.
Side by side for the race lead. 54, 48 through 3 and 4. Working lap number 60, 110 laps to go. Yusuf Ghali power move to the bottom of the racetrack, making the short way work. They're going to touch down the hill.
This will be a great run for Fuller here.
Yes, if we go right off the track in the final quarter, that'll allow Fuller to get a massive.
Here he comes.
Does he have a look?
Oh, big block here by Sanfilippo. Into the grass goes Ben Fuller toward turn 1, and Sanfilippo hangs on. He's loose. No! And he crashes hard in the exit of turn number 2. Don't try him here, boys. They're going to do it. Gritsko backs out. They touch. They're going to crash. Gritsko going to slam the attenuator hard into the wall. And Sarah Testa hits him as well. And big damage on these cars. That's a huge
Number 4, people are struggling for grip, going out of every single lane, trying to make a run. It's getting really insane.
Powered by AWS for the Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli at the Indianapolis 8-hour. We are 7 hours and 18 minutes into this 8-hour event.
John Miller way deep on the brakes to the inside of turn number 1 and 2. The spin, the 3 car gets turned around in the front of the car.
James Houghton looking for a place to go, but he's got Austin Cobb to the inside. Bit of a gap behind. I think that's about 15 or 16 spot as they come out of turn 3. Big slide for this.
Getting a run. He's got it. Going to be a drag racing line. Final corner. Checkered flag waving. Here they come. At Virginia National Raceway. To the line. Thompson, Darling, door to door. Banging doors. Fender to fender. I can't believe what we just saw.
It's the final race of the season for the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League, and we're going to take on a hometown classic. This is Summit Point Motorsports Park and Summit Point Raceway, the big track for the final race of the season, a 1.2-hour endurance event. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman for tonight's racing. GT4 and TCR cars taking on Summit Point. Tom, this racetrack is a classic in the eastern seaboard of racetracks. So excited to get this one underway. We always come here to either start or end a season. It feels like this is the right place to end off a season this time around.
Yep, the home of the Washington, D.C. region in real life and also in the sim, but for the Virtual Racing League, obviously tonight, we are in iRacing, racing GT4s and TCRs, and if you've been with us for most or all of the season, you know what to expect. This has been some of the highest quality sim racing that I've ever seen, some of the highest quality racing I've ever seen, to be honest, and I've been thrilled and honored to be able to announce it with you for the most of the season, along with a couple other commentators, and very excited to bring it home to what is a 1.2-hour quote-unquote endurance event here tonight.
Yeah, typically endurance events would be considered a couple hours or longer, but in the sim racing world, everything is condensed a little bit. So the longer you run, typically over an hour, are considered endurance races here in iRacing. Sort of depends on the level you're at, where your playing field is. Tonight, it's going to be at Summit Point. Again, 10 turns, 2.0 miles. We'll look at a track map here in just a little while, but qualifying is underway already for the TCR category. Let's talk about those categories, Tom. GT4 and TCR. We've been running with them all season long, and they've been racing really well together, but this is a racetrack where there's a lot of narrow portions, a lot of really tight and twisties, and that's a problem for multi-class racing.
It is. It's going to be reminiscent of Donington, maybe a little reminiscent of Lime Rock when we race multi-class there, and basically that means when the classes come together, chaos of varying levels of control typically ensues. You see that the track is very narrow, it's very bumpy, there's a couple of sections that are really slow, a couple sections that are really fast, and that really separates the front-wheel drive touring cars that we're watching now qualifying and the GT4 cars that are coming up in just a little bit. The other thing with this evening is that with it being the series finale, we have a big resurgence in participation, but we also have a lot of drivers flip-flopping which classes they've been doing, trying different things just for a good time tonight, because you know this is the sim. You can enjoy stuff like that. So as we watch these cars come through qualifying, you're going to notice some names that are maybe not in the right place, maybe not the place you expect them, and you're going to see some new names tonight too.
Murphy Nichols has a brand new livery, the Smoketown Beer Company, on the side of this car. It's been on it all season long, but now a new livery tonight looks very, very sharp as he works his way around. His best time, a 1:16.831, currently on pole, and this is a track that Murphy is a big fan of, so hopefully he can have a good run here tonight. And right now sits atop the standings. Ken Halseal down in third is probably the driver everyone's going to have to watch out for in this category in that number 23 Valvoline sponsored car. Dave Fitzgerald is out on track again, has been organizing and promoting this league for quite some time in the number 91. Talha Sadiq makes a return to DC Region Virtual Racing League action in the number 63 car. He's down in 8th right now. Across the line, Ken Halseal goes to the top of the board. A 1:16.462. Christopher Lapras just jumped into 2nd. And qualifying here is going to be super important. We always talk about the importance of qualifying in any race, but specifically at Summit Point. We mentioned how narrow this track is, Tom. Let's have a look here at Summit Point Raceway. And why is this track so challenging for a car like a TCR car?
Well, you see just from the track map, there's a big variety in corners, and at the top of your screen, that's the longest straightaway on the track. It's one of the longest straightaways in the country, really. You don't get straightaways that long very often. Headed down into turn number 1, which is an increasing radius corner. It's a little slower than you want it to be. Then you head up towards turn 3, a really sweeping corner that's really easy to get off track limits at, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Then the sweep down through turn 4 into the carousel section at turn 5, 6, 7. Those corners are incredibly slow. That makes it challenging for the TCR cars, which are front-wheel drive, to put the power down, but also they're a little too tight for the GT4 cars. Makes it a little bit like a bull in a china shop. Then you get the sweeping S's through turn 7, 8, 9, the run under the bridge into the final corner, turn 10, which is where we're watching now. An incredibly fast right-hander onto that fast front straight.
And out of turn number 10, carrying speed is so important. On board with Christopher Lapras, car in front of him, that's the number 3 car, is Ted Doroshev. In 12th, across the line for Lapras, he will go faster, a 1:16.1 to the top of the board over Ken Halseal's 1:16.19. So move the 25 car to the top spot.
11 thousandths between the two, and you'd see the 2 top guys in the class right now are typically GT4 competitors, and they're switching over for the evening just for some fun. I will say this track tends to cater to the TCR a little bit better as a driver than the GT4s. Like I mentioned, the GT4s are a little bit like a bull in a china shop here. The TCRs are pretty much right at home with the amount of downforce they make, the amount of speed they can carry, and it's cool to see a couple of our GT4 regulars switching over. But Peter Lausen, Will Robbins, Murphy Nichols, and the rest, keeping them honest. The guy we're missing tonight is the championship leader, probably has the championship pretty much sewn up, Elias Roman, who is moving, I believe, moving houses today, so he can't be with us.
Yeah, he will not be here competing. A driver that ran really well last week at Monza is Louis Alessi in the number 43 right now in 10th. Not probably as good of a qualifying effort as he would have liked, but after a strong run at Monza, he's got momentum coming into the night, Tom. And who knows, home track advantage perhaps.
Yeah, man, Monza was just so much fun to watch because it brought together some different drivers that we typically haven't seen wheel to wheel, and Louis Alessi was on the top of that list for me. He was just came alive and finished, I think, 2nd, right? Finished on the podium.
2nd or 3rd,
which was one of his first podiums of this season, but one of his first podiums in the DC Virtual Racing League. But there he is in the top 10. Just looking down the list, a number of names I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Definitely Lausen, Nichols, Robbins. There is one other name missing. I'm trying to rack my brain of who that is, but Jack Chrissy seems to be missing tonight as well. He's been one of the contenders throughout the last couple of rounds, but notably not on the track right now.
So qualifying is almost complete for the TCR cars. They'll get a few more minutes to scrub around and run down some times. Steve Mahler in the number 49 car. That is a very brightly colored SimLab and SimPit sponsored car right now, the orange and the blue on that vehicle. Right now in 7th, Darren Heath in the 45 is back this week in a Smoketown Brewing Station car, not too dissimilar from the one that the number 5 Murphy Nichols is driving. And I mentioned how good Murphy is at Summit Point. His favorite racetrack coming here tonight, was on pole for a little while, still inside the top 5. He's going to be a threat tonight, especially if he can stay in touch with those front 3.
Well, big time, and that's something we haven't gotten to talk about much yet, but tonight is a 1.2-hour race. And what earlier on I said, quote-unquote, endurance. The reason I say that is there's no pit stop required tonight. There's really no endurance racing strategy that goes into this one, but that's a long time to drive by yourself. So you're not going to see cars come into pit lane for tires. You're not going to see refueling, as far as I know, but you will see drivers managing their pace, and we're going to see this thing ebb and flow quite a bit. So some of these drivers that are jumping to TCR for the first time, I'm looking at you, Chris Lapras, Ken Halseal, the drivers behind, who may be a tenth or two off pace in qualifying, they know how to make these cars last for 40-plus minutes every week. And I think we're going to see the familiarity with those cars also benefit those drivers, even if they're not in the top 2 on the front row in qualifying.
So you mentioned not having to refuel. What about tire conservation here tonight, specifically for the TCRs because of all the slow speed kind of scrubbing you've got to do? And let's talk about the M4 GT4 versus the Cayman. We're going to get into that a little bit deeper in qualifying, Tom, but the M4's rear tires are notorious for falling off, kind of slide that thing around. Is it going to struggle tonight at this tight and twisty racetrack here at Summit Point?
Yeah, certainly. In about 2 minutes, we're going to see the GT4 cars lining up, and you'll notice the size differential of the GT4 Cayman and the GT4 BMW. But while we're watching the TCR cars, these are front-wheel drive touring cars, and I noticed a lot of conversation about setup this week. This track is narrow, it's bumpy, it's got a couple of corners where front grip is just absolutely critical because you're slowing the car down to third gear. These cars are geared very short, so third gear is 60, 50 miles an hour. Then you've got to get it going and straighten the wheel up and get it off that hairpin corner. So maintaining the front grip of these cars is going to be really critical. The other key part about that is the setup going into the race is going to be a little tough because you want the car to be good at the end, which is going to make it a little murdery at the beginning.
Daniel Hortzis comes across the line in 16th in the number 34 car, a couple seconds off pace. As the GT4 cars begin to roll, and it is a mad scramble out of the pit lane as the field gets underway. A lot of Caymans, but there's a few M4s interspliced here. I heard that DJ Alessandrini was going to flip a coin. He has chosen the M4 tonight. It might put him at a slight disadvantage potentially as the field gets up under pace here for 14 minutes worth of qualifying time. There's DJ out front in the Red Bull car. And a handful of Caymans behind. There's Colin Daner making a return in the number 77. That's that blue Cayman in the middle of your screen. Daniel Gross in the number 2 car is out here. There he is, another one of those Caymans. Ryan Daner in the 33. Darian Taggart in the number 9. He is in a Cayman as well. And it's going to be a very busy racetrack. We've got about 17 GT4 cars. This track is going to be very difficult to find open space, even in qualifying.
With that split, that makes it about 50-50 between TCR and GT4. But as we pan through the carousel section into the S's, watching Darian Taggart with that Alpha Tora, livery, he goes for a big spin, and that's one of the key points is early on in this race, the Caymans are not super easy to manage. It's a very tight track with big curbs and lots of bumps. The GT4 BMW tends to be a little bit easier, but as you mentioned, the tires on those big Bimmers are a little tougher to manage. But there's championship leader, DJ Alessandrini, and with Ken Hausiel not present, I'm looking down the list for Alex LaRose. He is in attendance, but he sits 98 points behind DJ Alessandrini on the list. So I think DJ's got this one locked up. Kind of cool to see him taking the less preferential car in this race coming in, knowing that he's got the championship locked up. We're going to see a cool battle between a couple of different makes at the front, and DJ, he's quick, but he's probably got the down hand on this one.
I'd say so. So he comes across the line. He's the first driver to record a lap. One of the interesting factoids about this particular facility is the pit lane exit's actually before the lap begins. So your first lap actually does count for time just because you actually start a flying lap basically the second you come out of the pits. So Alessandrini does record a time. It's going to drop significantly the next couple laps as they put in legitimate times. Alex LaRose, you mentioned LaRose in this Cayman. He has been one of the newest, fastest drivers in the series as a recent join, not even only to the series, but to iRacing in general. And he's been mighty, mighty fast. So you look at him as an improved driver over the course of the season. Right out of the gate was competitive, but now he's banging doors with Alessandrini pretty much every race. So I'd expect this 26 car specifically because he's in the Cayman to be a hot commodity tonight at the front.
Yeah, I really think he's probably the car to beat. And 1.2 hours is a long time. And as you mentioned, is a busy track. So we can't really predict what's going to happen tonight nearly as cleanly as we might predict other nights. But the Cayman with the fastest driver is who I would pick if it was just a raw pace race. And that would be Alex LaRose tonight, I think. We do have other drivers returning and coming back into the GT4 cars. And as I mentioned, one of our TCR favorites, Jack Chrissy, switched the other way. He's in the GT4 cars this week in the number 6.
Interesting. So Jack Chrissy in a Cayman, and he's found himself backed up a barrier in turn number 1. Well, not going so well for him so far. Francois Brou is back here in the number 69 car. He's been in the silver Cayman all season long. He's been looking for some better luck. When we ran GT3 cars a season ago, he was mighty quick. The GT4s have not been an easy transition for Francois. Yeah, they're
very different driving cars up until recently. Now, I have to say, with the recent updates to iRacing, the GT3 and GT4 cars are much more similar to each other in the favor of the GT4 style driving. So, take that for what it is. But Francois does have a very good record of super low incident points in this race. He keeps it super clean. His car is always just as shiny as you see it now at the end of the races. Even 2 rounds ago, he had 0 incident points, which means he didn't even drop a tire in the grass for the entire 40-minute race back at Suzuka, which is quite a feat. So Francois, maybe seeking better finishing results, has yet to crack the top 5 in the results for the season, but he is absolutely by far our cleanest driver.
Right now, currently 14th. Don Manning is back here this week. He is in an M4. 9 drivers have laid down times at the front of the field so far, with Alessandrini and LaRose only separated by 12 thousandths of a second. Then Jonathan White in this number 22 Turner BMW. White has made an appearance in the Spec MX-5 Sim Racing Challenge, almost won it famously with some drama in the closing moments of the season ender at COTA earlier this year. Right now, he's running very well in GT4. I'd expect him to be in that top 5 group, as LaRose bests Alessandrini by about a 10th and a quarter. So LaRose goes to the top of the board, and it looks like he's going to go for another lap here.
Yeah, glad to see Jonathan White is back. He sits 6th in the championship points, having missed a couple of rounds, but he is 4 starts and missed my lineup here, but he's got a couple of top 5s, a couple of podiums. Got to see him in the BMW as well, as we're going to have more of that balance between the Cayman and the BMW, but he's certainly been a factor for most of the season, especially on the tracks that favor the BMW. Thinking back to Sebring, etc., he was super, super quick. So he's going to be a contender, and he tends to run in formation with Thomas Layton, who's not here tonight, but those two are always blazing fast in the M4s. Speaking of M4s, Andrew Kessel is also here tonight, and he had a great qualifying effort, a great start to the race last week at Monza, and he's been a consistent factor in GT4, but had some rough luck towards the middle and end of the Monza race, so he's back sitting 8th right now in qualifying. Another BMW driver that maybe has a little more work cut out for him in qualifying, but I think we'll have a little easier time with the race tonight.
Very striking livery on this car as well, too. It's like a work of art, like a mural on the racetrack as he works through turn number 3 and heads down towards 4, 5, and 6. That tight combination we mentioned earlier. Up above, you're going to see how aggressive this corner really is. And, well, I guess it is hidden behind the trees there just a little bit. A great passing zone, but as you come down into turn 5, Tom, there's always the risk of tracking out too wide, getting your tires into the grass, and then not being able to stop for turn 5. So there's a little bit of risk, especially on the opening lap with cold tires. Maybe you want to go in there a little bit slower than you think you can take it, because you could just do that, get your tires off in the grass, and have a bad time, take someone else out and yourself.
Yeah, big time. I think patience is the name of the game tonight for the first lap, 2 or 3 even, as we get these things spread out. And I mentioned it a couple of times. I hope I don't say it too many times like a broken record, but bull in a china shop for me is one of the keys to the race with these GT4 cars. They're just not bad, but a little bit of the wrong combination of power and downforce for Summit Point. They just are a lot to manage around here. They probably don't look like much. You see BMW M4s, you see Porsche Caymans on the road, but when you mix it with some of the corners here at Summit Point, it gets really challenging. But back at the front, look at this BMW lockout in the front row.
I was going to say, and not only that, they're tied for the top spot.
Oh,
113, 845. You can't get much closer than that. Look at them running nose to tail as well. If you weren't watching, you think they might be planning something here. They run a nose to tail like this. White is going to go off on cold tires here, but you can't really get much closer than tied.
No, that's pretty wild, and I'm curious how far down iRacing's numbers go, if they're even just down tied to the 4th, 5th, 6th.
They go down pretty far, I think. Okay. But I think the numbers that we can see only go down to the 1,000th.
Sure.
So I think it goes down to the 100,000th in terms of the timing and scoring. So I don't think it's possible to actually tie. Someone will always have that advantage. But, I mean, it's always cool to look at the board and see 2 exact numbers stacked on top of each other.
And it's definitely a surprise to see those being both BMWs. Also interesting to see both drivers just reset with about 5.5 minutes of qualifying to go. By the time they cross the line, it'll be 5 minutes, which means fresh tires for a new go at it. And it's probably also a roulette when we get to the actual free space on the track. So we arrive with Alex LaRose. A couple other drivers that I'm seeing here worth talking about. Kevin Zhu is back. He had a killer round at Monza. He sits 4th in qualifying. And Danny Gross, who had a pretty dramatic round, but has had some really strong runs this season out of 9 rounds. He sits 5th. And then finally, Ryan Maloney, who is 9th currently in qualifying. He was our race winner back at Donington in a BMW. I'm curious, so he's in that BMW once again. So that's a race winner from this season. Looks like he's having a hard time getting that car up to speed here just a little bit, as he sits at a gaping 6/10 off of the pole.
He just did run his best lap a moment ago, so we'll see if he can improve it again this time around. Still 5 minutes left in qualifying, and lap times here are pretty short, so up until the last few moments of this, we could still see some times that improve. Francois Brou is also tied with Maloney, a 1:14.539 there, so we have 2 ties in the field, and how many drivers? We only have 6/10 covering the entire top of the grid, and 81 thousandths between our top 3. That's unbelievable.
What are the chances of getting 2 ties on the board at the same time? As we click down, 4.5 minutes to go, and all this tells me is these guys are not messing around coming in this night. They are well practiced, they're well rehearsed, and they know what they're coming here to do to round this DC Region Virtual Racing League Winter 2020 season off.
Well, you wonder why so many drivers, or why the competition and skill gap is so low. This is a track that most of these competitors are home to. Remember that this is the Washington, D.C. region SCCA. This is pretty much the home track for almost everyone in this field. And that gap even just tightened up more. LaRose pulls within 25 thousandths of Jonathan White, and that brings him within 25 thousandths of the leader, DJ Alessandrini. So 25 thousandths of a second covering the top 3 on the board. Unbelievable. 4 minutes left to make things even tighter at the top of the grid. The Dahners returned. We mentioned Colin Dahner in the number 77. He's in that bright blue car. He runs in 6th. And Ryan Dahner in the number 33. That's that Castrol plaid car. Is it the Pfaff Porsche livery? Yes, it is. Runs 12th right now, trying to close in on Ryan, or I should say Colin, but a couple tenths of a second left to get there. Jumps up 1 spot, though. Jumps up to 11th over Darian Taggart. 1:14.636. Drivers that have not really had great qualifying efforts. Jack Chrissy, remember he was in the TCR car, switched to GT4. It has been a massive struggle to find pace here tonight. It's actually been out qualified on time by 2 of our 16 TCR cars. Don Manning has been out qualified by 5 of those TCR cars, so some struggles here and there for a couple of our GT4 competitors. And this is what happens in the real world too, Tom. You've raced in the TCR category, and you've done the bull in the China shop thing through the tailpipes of the GT4 field. I saw you charge through the field at VIR doing that. Guilty. So this gap between the GT4s and TCRs is pretty small here, even at Summit Point.
Yeah, it's something worth talking about for sure. As we have multi-class racing tonight, coming into the round, this track is one of the smallest gaps that we see between the GT4s and TCRs, and the majority of that time is going to be down the second to last straight and the front straightaway, so between turns 9 and 10, and then between 10 and 1. So you know, the time made through this section, for example, these are the sweeping S's coming up towards turn 9 and now headed towards turn 10. The TCR cars are every bit as fast through a lot of those sections, which is going to make the multi-class interaction even tougher tonight. So we have a couple of different cool storylines to follow. The first one for me is definitely that multi-class storyline. When the cars start to overlap, how do they interact with one another? The second one is the BMW versus Porsche storyline that we've had for most of the season. And I really think that while we have a front row lockout for the BMWs, the Porsche proved at Sebring, which was an 1.5-hour race, to be the stronger platform over the long run. And I think we're going to see that again here today.
So 1.5 minutes left here in qualifying. Jonathan White has gone quicker than Alessandrini and has finally split up the tie at the top of the order. Goes quicker by about 1/10 and 3/4 over Alessandrini. LaRose still within 26 thousandths of DJ. Kevin Zhu, a strong effort in that number 243. We saw him have a pretty fun scrap at Monza. Wasn't really for the top spot. I'm sure he'd like to be included in that today. And he's a pretty sizable gap off of LaRose, so that we might see a 3-car breakaway at the front here. But with the traffic, once we get about a half hour into this race, who knows what could happen at the front.
Ooh, look at Zhu fighting power down on exit of turns 1 and 2. I was pretty surprised actually to see him in the BMW this week, as he tends to drive the Porsche both in this series and for the entirety of the Rodenzo Sports Car Challenge that was here on Sim TV. But maybe he took a liking to this BMW. So we have, of the front rows, 1 Porsche surrounded by a whole lot of M4s.
Last couple flying laps, looked like Alessandrini is pulled in and called it a day. Looks like Jack Chrissy did go better. That was a 13th place run of 1:14.766. Only leaves 1 driver split by some of the TCR cars. It's going to be grid by category, so no worries about having to start in the middle of the TCR field. Looking elsewhere, no other major shifts or changes. We'll have a quick look at the weather information here, Tom. Is this going to be a concern? It's mild conditions. I don't think it'll be a big topic today.
Yeah, 80 degrees on track, 77 in the air. It looks like it's relatively later in the day as well. So
early morning, actually.
Oh, it's early morning. So
yes.
Things will continue to get hotter throughout this session, but I don't think that things will get too hot and slippy. Speaking of hot and slippy, someone's going for a little bit of a ride down through the chute.
Looks like David Thompson in the number 51. Qualifying gets complete. Jonathan White and Christopher Lapras are sitting on pole for our season finale of the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. The 1.2 hours at the point is about to begin. You're watching Sim TV. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined by IMSA driver Tom O'Gorman. You've had experience in these cars. You've won in the TCR car twice. So you've got experience here, and every time you open your mouth, it's usually an informational tidbit. So thanks for being here and being with me. You're sort of stuck here now. As we're sitting in the same room. You're Finian 2.0 at this point.
I was going to say, if you notice, my audio sounds great this week, and
yes.
that's because Kyle and I both relocated to Chicago, Illinois, and we sit in our broadcast room in our new apartment. So
yes,
happy to be here for the final round.
Yeah, you're stuck now. You can't back out.
And here I am. I guess I'm retired as a driver, full-time sim broadcaster.
You're not retired as a driver. Let's not get there yet. So Jonathan White again at the top of the order. Over at Alessandrini, they will share the front row in GT4. We'll share the rest of the front row with you in just a minute. We'll have one more quick look at our track map for the afternoon. And when we talk about sectors of this racetrack, the first and final sector at Summit Point Motorsports Park are pretty fast and flowy. The middle sector, though, really from turn 4 on to turn 8, that is really where the challenge is going to be here today. In the GT4 cars, you're not going to be able to get any passes done in those twisty bits in the middle half of the lap.
No, and realistically, as you look at the numbers pop up there, turns 4 to turn almost 9 are pretty much a single file mandatory type of corner. So if you see cars going side by side through any of those sections, that's a really high risk, high reward maneuver. Passing zones, though, talking turn 1, absolutely on the brakes. Maybe a run out of turn 1 towards turn 3 if you can get the job done. Maybe on the brakes through turns 4 into 5 into the chute. But ultimately, it really comes down to that one braking zone and mistakes.
If you've just joined us here for the first time on Sim TV, make sure that you subscribe for more. The Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League will return in the spring, along with the Spec MX5 Sim Racing Challenge on Wednesday nights. They will likely alternate. Don't have a full schedule for anything just yet, but make sure that you're subscribed. If you're watching on the D.C. Region Facebook page, make sure you drop a like here, or join us over here on Sim TV to join in the discussion as we head down to our grid to begin the gridding process. Let's roll through our starting lineup here, Tom. On the front row tonight, it's going to be Jonathan White on pole with DJ Alessandrini on the outside of that front row.
Starting on the second row, we have our first Porsche. Alex LaRose starts third in the 26 car. Danny Gross alongside. Jumped up there late in qualifying to start fourth.
Row number 3, Kevin Zhu in the 243 car. Andrew Kessel starts 6th in the number 18.
Behind them, starting on the fourth row, Colin Daner returning this week in the 77, and Chad Griffith in the 30 car will start 8th.
In row number 5, starting on the inside row, Ryan Maloney returns to the D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League in the 28 car. Francois Brou starts 10th in the 69 Cayman.
Then it's Ryan Daner in the 33, starting 11th, and Darian Taggart on the outside of the 6th row.
In row number 7, starting 13th, Jack Chrissy in the number 6 car. Richard Spicer rolls off 14th in the number 15 car.
Then on the 8th row, it's Bob Schumacher in the 55, and 16th will be Chris Spiller in the 980.
In row number 9, I lost count of what we were on. David Thompson in the number 51. Christopher Lapras, actually it's not going to be Lapras, it'll actually be Don Manning in the number 92. Lapras and House Seal are going to share that front row in TCR, Tom. And row number 2 will be Peter Laus and Murphy Nichols. But going to be a pretty interesting fight amongst the TCR cars as well. There's actually, the field sizes are pretty much identical today, 16 and 17. Which is a dichotomy we haven't really seen before. Usually the GT4 field's been slightly larger. Does that play into how this race?
Yeah, typically the GT4s are at least twice the size in car counts, but as always, a split start. The TCR field continues to roll across the bottom of your screen, so don't forget that there are, again, 16 TCR, 17 GT4 cars, which makes the interactions between the two of them pretty interesting. The other thing is this is a relatively short lap. You saw it about a minute 13 to a minute 16, depending on the class and car. And with that, the split start tends to be about 20 seconds between the classes. Do the mental math. It's not very long until the GT4 cars start to come back around and end up in the bumpers of the TCR cars.
DJ Alessandrini pulled off to the side of the racetrack here at the start. Might have potential issues here. And sometimes you get your spot back, sometimes you don't. We'll see what happens here. as he's going to get passed by the entire field.
Yeah, so something that goes on with sim racing, there's not necessarily mechanical issues, there's not necessarily car failures factored into this race. The car will always run unless you crash it, et cetera, but your sim racing equipment is part of the factor here, and you're talking not only a VR headset, you're talking a computer, you're talking a steering wheel, pedals, all of those different things, and at any moment they can all go awry. I've had it happen to me before, so potentially some issues for Alessandrini loading into this race. Maybe had his computer system let him down, but he's going to start charging back through the TCR field and try really, really hard to get back up to that front row.
So the field rolling through turn number 3 now. This is a very fast corner, and at the exit there's that gravel trap there. That's an off track, so you got to keep yourself out of there. It also will kick up dust and bring it back onto the racetrack as well, but you're going to see drivers pushing that. What some drivers in the sim will do is actually track out just so they catch the edge of that gravel, and that'll hold them on course, funnily enough. So we'll see if that plays a factor into the race at all here this afternoon. And then down into turn 5, this is probably your primary passing opportunity. One of the better ones other than maybe turn 1. You have to be a little bit gutsy to get it done here, but you totally can. Leads into a very sharp left-hander, and then the right-hander here, turn number 6. This is where you're all going to be single file, kind of begging for grip in those front tires. And doubling up and getting prepared for our start here for what should be about a 59-lap race. This is a 1.2-hour event to close out the season. Again, 16 GT4 cars and 17 TCR. We'll have a class split here on the start, so the TCR pole sitter, Christopher Lapras, is going to leave, looks to be about a quarter of a lap gap between the front of the field. Like Alessandrini has found his way back to the front of the field now, doubled up, racked up and stacked up. Pace car pulls off, about 59 laps worth of racing and already firing off. Looks like a bit of a jump start. It looks like he's going to back it down. And here we go. He gets it lined back up as we come to the start-finish line. It's a little ways away. Green flag flies in Summit Point Raceway for the season finale of the DC Racing League. Green flag flies, and we're racing at Summit Point. Down into turn number 1, double file. M4 is charging and leading the field down to the first corner.
Yeah, awkward between Jonathan White and the rest of the field there, but he recovered it. Now gets an attack from Alessandrini around the outside. The rest of the GT4 field is fairly clean in the braking zone in turn 1. Look at the Caymans struggling to keep up with the BMWs off of that that rolling start and then out of turn 1, but LaRose keeps the point.
Oh, Alessandrini gets turned. He's going to slam into the barrier, and Alessandrini's out of the race in the opening lap here, and disaster strikes. Jonathan White through without issue.
It was an odd incident, the two of them super tight, and going up into turn 3 like that side by side, as I mentioned early on, it's tough to make it work. And it looks like the two were just on kind of opposite trajectories. Wow. Not a real necessary incident. They weren't racing each other particularly hard, and I think it was just a lack of either awareness, spatial concept, whatever it may be, a lapse in that. And unfortunately, Alessandrini is on the back foot for the rest of the race. He has plenty of time to start charging through the field, but look at this in TCR. Lapras over Hauseal loses the back end a little bit down into the carousel for the first time, loses some distance, but they're clean in TCR.
Our clock and timing and scoring shows everything up to 1 hour, so we have an hour and 10.5 minutes remaining in this event. It will tick back over to 60 minutes at the top of the hour. Brian McRae is turned around at the exit of turn number 7. Some damage on that car, but he should be able to continue.
It's back going in the right way, but Darian Taggart side by side with Jack Chrissy down into turn 1. Starting lap number 2, gentlemen need to remember that this is a long race. It may not have pit stops, it may not have tire changes. It basically is a 1.2 hour sprint race, but that makes it all the more worthwhile battling every single moment. Murphy Nichols has a run on Ken Hauseal, pops out down on the brakes deep into turn 1, almost into the grass. Hauseal tries to go to the outside, and honestly the outside tends to be the better way around turn 1 because it becomes the inside for turn 3. Watch it happen here.
Remember, the strength that Murphy Nichols had at Monza last week was on the brakes. He was slamming the binders and making it work, and he's doing just that here today at Summit Point. Big slide through turn 3. He'll keep it on course, but just barely. Behind him, Steve Mahler is side by side with Tala Sadiq in the Martini Racing car, and indeed it is.
Yeah, good to see Tala back. Murphy Nichols, big bobble, turned in early as if he was not side by side, and unfortunately goes for a big scoot across the grass, comes back across the field, and the 56 of Peter Lausen also gets tagged and turned. These guys are sprint racing like it's the last lap at this point in TCR, but everybody gets going back, and luckily these cars are pretty resilient.
Lots happening here in the early moments, so we'll try to catch up and give you more than an update. A lap. Here's Ryan Maloney side by side with Colin Dana. Give Maloney the spot that's for 7th up at the top of the field. Jonathan White leads. Alex LaRose maybe is the favorite in this race now, Tom, with Alessandrini out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these two interact with one another. Kind of harkens back to Sebring, where Ken Hauseal was in the BMW, Alessandrini was in the Porsche, and Hauseal defended for over an hour in some of the most textbook racing and awesome action we've seen in a long, long time. And unfortunately, Hauseal came up about 15 minutes short on that race, but the BMW was super strong for a long time. And that car is both good in a straight line and good on the brakes. So if LaRose needs to get creative with traffic, I think he's going to have to lean into that aspect of this wheel-to-wheel battle once they start to catch those TCR cars.
Hi, official. They added marshals in the flag stand since the last time we did these camera sets. And so they're just going to pop in front of us every once in a while. Field working their way through the middle sector of this track now. Andrew Kessel and Daniel Gross running 4th and 5th. GT4 sort of single filed out back in TCR, though, for 2nd place. Murphy Nichols, with that strong attack on Ken Hauseal a lap ago, hasn't been able to repeat it. But he is looking pretty racy up here at the front of the field and pretty much on pace with those front two.
He is, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily the right move. I think you can get away with that for 2 or 3 laps, but with it being a 1.2-hour race in these front-wheel drive touring cars, you hear the throttle management that goes into the thing through the S's, and those are some of the faster corners. You can imagine the throttle control in the low-speed corners. So I think we'll see, for the most part, or at least I would expect, I could be wrong for sure, but I would expect to see these guys cooperate for the most part until the later stages of this race. At this point, it's just not losing touch with the car in front of you.
Alessandrini is out, will not attempt to return in that car. That car pretty much destroyed. Brian McRae, who was that TCR car we saw turn around at the exit at turn 8, he has also called it a Nichols in too hot. Just not enough temperature in those rear tires yet. He's going to bork it again on exit. This is going from not great to worse for
big
B5.
Awkward tank slap, and Will Robbins squeezes through, goes up into 3rd, and that's going to put them pretty far back off the leaders in TCR. So Lapras and Hauseal have checked out a bit. Look at how tight and tidy Robbins looks. You see that he's really trying not to exert those front tires too much, but Hauseal pounding the curbs down through the chute into the carousel section, pulling back up towards the front, and is absolutely there at this point.
Right behind, and it's all about patience with this car. You have to kind of wait to get back on throttle in some of these corners. The front tires will just pull you off track. So it's a game of waiting and kind of getting this car straight and pointed. It's so much point and shoot. Now, it might not be like that in real car time. You might be able to get on throttle a little bit sooner, but here you have to wait till it's straight and then power back out. And Hauseal's doing a little bit better job of that right now. See Lapras miss the turn in there. Big slide. That's going to heat up those rear tires.
Yeah, that's certainly something that doesn't necessarily get talked about much with the front-wheel drive race cars. You'd think a big horsepower rear-wheel drive car teaches you throttle control. Look at the run Hauseal's got. We haven't talked about the draft much, but this long front straightaway, he backs out of it. He's definitely chilling for this point in the Valvoline car. But back to my point, a high horsepower rear-wheel drive car might teach you throttle control, but nothing's as good at teaching you throttle control than a slightly overpowered or under-gripped front-wheel drive car.
Daniel Huertas in the 34 has gotten by Dave Fitzgerald. Huertas started this race in 15th. He's actually climbed up 7 spots already, which is a very good effort so far. We'll slide on back up to, whoa, big moment there through turn 3. Can he hold on to it? He's going to loop it right in front of some traffic. Here come Benson Ty, Darren Heath. They're going to squeeze through. Peter Lausen's going for another slide in the background as well. And it looks like there's some struggle to get temperature in those rear tires, or is it a downforce issue?
Well, I think this just popped into my head. We talked about early on in the qualifying session that making these cars behave for 1.2 hours means that they're a little bit diabolical in the first couple of laps. And I think we've absolutely seen that be the case. These cars are set up to handle decently 1.2 hours from now, which means they're super, super loose. The back end is floating around all over the place. That's not necessarily a problem in the GT4 cars. Those cars are pretty good to go, and Jonathan White is doing a good job controlling the pace of this field at the front by the tune of almost 8 tenths.
Alex LaRose has fallen off just a little bit. Kevin Zhu remains in 3rd, and it's Kessel and Gross running out the rest of the top 5. No major battles happening here, unless you count this one. Darian Taggart, Richard Spicer. This is for 11th.
Spicer tends to drive the BMW, switching over to the Porsche this week. He's got his bumper crammed up the backside of Darian Taggart, who tends to race the TCR car. Shifted back to the GT4, came in this week as well. So a couple of drivers probably still within their learning curve of these two cars. We'll see who gains the learning curve faster as Taggart's really pushing the limits through the S's.
And that is a deadly curb to step over the boundary of. If you get that left rear tire on the grass, it'll send you into the trees here at Summit Point. through the final corner. And this is all about building a run and using the slipstream to your advantage here, Tom. Carrying that speed down towards turn 1. You talked about how long the straightaway is. It just feels like it goes on forever. But that's all slipstream space that you can use as we see Maloney and Griffith going at it for 6th. Give Maloney 6th spot.
Let's have another spot. That's a pretty good charge. I think Andrew Kessel's also got a pretty good charge going as well, but a pair of BMWs battling for 6th and 7th, and then this is the battle for 4th. Andrew Kessel and Danny Gross, who actually, they couldn't escape each other last week at Monza, and I think the weekend before at Suzuka, so these two just can't get away from one another, and here we are again, battling 4th and 5th.
Let's move on back to TCR. Ken Ausil's right behind Lapras, but he hasn't been making attempts to pass. Do you think this is one of those co-opetition moments where you're just trying to gap yourself from 3rd and 4th on back, or do you think that Ausil just doesn't feel the need to press this early in this race?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I'm not sure that Lapras has much say in the team strategy here. They're probably not necessarily working together, but Ausil is totally comfortable with where he's at. He doesn't have any pressure from behind, and he's just kind of conserving the front of that car. Every ounce that he can get a draft off of the back of Lapras is an amount that he doesn't have to push that car in the corners, and that's going to be good news for his front tires.
Ooh, big moment there, sliding through turn 5. Have a look at his lap time, though. His best lap was the previous one. That tells me that they're making speed, and actually for Lapras, it was the same deal. So they're both making speed right now. There's no reason to start mixing up and battling amongst yourselves when you're going a full second faster than the guys in 3rd and 4th.
For sure, and the reason I say Lapras may not be in on that is he's probably not necessarily upset by that, but they may not have a plan going on. He may just be sitting knowing that Ausil is unraveling his strategy, and Lapras doesn't have much to do with it.
Onto the front straightaway again. A bit of a mistake there by Lapras, and I wonder if Ausil will sit on this or if he'll make another move. Looks like this time he's going to go by. Feel like maybe lifting would have been too much of a slowdown for him, and they're going to run door-to-door off into the first corner.
Really critical to get this pass completed on the entry, because you can hold the outside around, and we've seen that end up being the inside of turn 3. Ausil gets it done, so that's important to close that door before the apex of turn 1, then accelerate through turns 2 and make sure you're single file through this point so you don't end up with a situation like we had at the front of GT4 on lap 1.
Tires off in the dirt at the exit of that corner. Behind them are Scott Merker, Steve Moeller. They just traded spots. Moeller was a little slow out of turn 1. Wanted to jump back to the lead, though. I don't think these guys are working together as well as I thought they were. They're scrapping pretty good here at the front. Lapras is backed off for now. I don't think intentionally.
Yeah, had a little bit of that mistake coming onto the front straightaway, and now we'll see, does Ausil start to just put in flyers, or as fast as you can go without exerting the tires too much, and whether Lapras sticks with him. Look at the pace that he's got through the S's, hustles that Valvoline's livery car off the track a little bit, but pretty quickly through the S's. Actually, that's a pretty big mistake. Goes off the track, the front-wheel drive car does not put the power down. Lapras goes up the inside, throws it in there, and now it's going to be an over-under. These two are battling early on, and careful, boys. Will Robbins might get there.
And Murphy Nichols is right behind them, but they're also beginning their own battle. So for the race lead as they come by the start-finish straight, going to be banging doors down here to turn 1, and if that pass for 3rd happening, Murphy Nichols has the nose ahead of Robbins, but into turn 1, door-to-door for the race lead, and Ausil's got it back.
Glad to see TCR is in TCR form with battles always and everywhere. Battling for the lead, battling for 3rd. There's the background. Murphy Nichols picked up the spot, but at the front, Ken Ausil leads back into turn 1, having lost the spot on his lap. He'll probably learn from that mistake and hopefully not make it again.
Going to do it on purpose by any means. Back in 7th place in GT4, here's Chad Griffith and Colin Daner in the number 77. I think they traded spots a little earlier. They're going to do it again here down towards turn 1 if Daner can get a run, but he doesn't have it built up high enough.
And that's one of the problems we see consistently with the Cayman versus BMW is the Cayman, as well as it might draft off the big silhouette of the BMW, you see the size difference there. It's just not fast enough in a straight line to do much with it, even though it is pretty good on the brakes. So you got to really pressure somebody into a mistake or just have a lot of extra speed on them. Back in TCR, whoa.
Benson Ty in the 503 car is heading off down in turn number 5. We'll have a quick look at how he got himself in this situation. He was right in front of Peter Lausen in the 56. I wonder if there was a touch here. Just got in a little bit hot and just drove in way too deep there, Tom, and just got the car off kilter.
Yeah, pretty easy to do, as that's one of the most challenging braking zones I know of, coming through the chute into the carousels.
Here is Andrew Kessel and Daniel Gross. Big moment there, skippity-hopping in with the bump there in turn number 9. There's a pretty sizable depression in the pavement, and if you slide over that, the car will kind of skip and hop over it. Gross had a big moment. Killed the momentum. He was sizing up Kessel.
Ooh, look at Kessel, the run through 10 onto the front straightaway, just drives into the distance. When you're looking at it from Danny Gross's perspective, they've got a pretty comfortable gap back from Kevin Zhu. Kevin's going to be liking that one, but you got to be careful because Ryan Maloney has started to run them down.
Traffic back here. There's one of the TCR cars. And speaking of traffic, I kind of wanted to get an idea of where our leaders were. There's Jonathan White leading the GT4 category, and you see up the road, I think there's a couple TCR cars. Benson Ty, you can see more off in the distance. We're about to start mixing up the cauldron here of multi-class racing.
And once it starts, it does not stop. So what's the saying? Double trouble, boil and double, or something like that?
Something like that.
That is absolutely what's going to start. Darian Taggart goes for a ride in turn 1 and 2, gets it back pointed the right way. Probably just overshot it by a bit, but absolutely for the leaders, they're going to start to overlap some of those TCR cars that have made some mistakes or had a rough race so far, and it'll just continue to get chaotic beyond that point.
And with, when you start off a race poorly, you're not really in the mindset where you want to be helpful necessarily. So we could see things get a little bit interesting, but White's going to get an easy pass here on the 503, I'd imagine, on the straightaway. Straightaway speed difference, what, 10 to 15 miles an hour maybe at the top end here, which we should be exploiting here. Jonathan White, 145 miles an hour plus. Let's keep an eye on it. 147, 148 VMAX for him into turn 1.
A little under 135 for the TCR cars. So yeah, you called it about 12 to 15 miles an hour difference between the two, which is plenty as long as you get that run at the right time. Now Alex LaRose has a little bit more of a problem to solve because he's not going to have that easy straightaway to drive by on. Well, Benson Ty drives off the track again. That might solve his problem. It does.
It might make it a little easier. Through the trees here at Summit Point into turn number 5. LaRose is through. In a very short straightaway before turn 5 that allows you to basically finish you kind of track out, slam on the brakes, come across the racetrack into turn 5. Some people actually stay drivers left and just kind of keep it tight through 5. There's a couple different ways you can do it. I'm not really sure that it matters how you take it because the next section is so short that you're not really leading onto a straightaway. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about that.
Yeah, it definitely becomes a little quote-unquote autocrossy, if you want to call it that. It's almost better to cut distance than it is to carry speed. But the bigger problem is when you're wheel-to-wheel racing, where do you position the car down through turns 4 into turn 5, where we call the chute?
There's a battle for position. This is 12th. Bob Shoemaker in the 55 car. Jack Chrissy in the number 6. Chrissy, again, jumping ship from the TCR to the GT4 category this week. It's been a bit of a struggle, but trying to grab a spot away from this bright orange number 55.
Goes off throttle early, trying to give himself space for the run. Gets a good entry, but unfortunately didn't have enough space to do anything with it. You saw him run up on the bumper at the apex, and nothing doing there. The BMW spools back up and pulls to the tune of 2 to 3 car lengths down the length of this front straightaway, and Chrissy will have another go for another lap.
Daniel Gross on the back of Andrew Kessel. This would be for 4th place. Ryan Maloney just beyond him in 6th. We've got some traffic coming up. That 2 car, actually the 18 car, almost got the left rear tire off into the grass on the entrance to turn 4. It's got to be a scary moment when you feel the car start to step out. Got to be pretty quick with the hands to catch it.
I can't emphasize too much how small this track feels when you get cars, especially side by side. Danny Gross with the inside run, that becomes the outside for turn 8. Now turn 9, but maybe the over-under gets a good run through turn 9 down this short straightaway. Does the Cayman have enough to go? Go, Kessel's off.
Kessel's off in the grass at the exit of 9. Tank Slapper gathers it back up. Through comes Ryan Maloney into 5th spot as well. Side by side through the final corner for those twin M4s. Move the 28 car up to 5th, but Kessel might have a run building. Grab another spot back here.
Gross has an opportunity to start to pull away if he's quick enough, but watch the run Maloney's got. He's starting to fade towards the center of the track. He's thinking about it, but stays in line. Now Kessel deep on the brakes, has to tuck in as well. Oh, he's really close to the bumper there, but they're going to stay clean through turns 1 and 2.
Thought about going up the inside there, but chose not to. Meanwhile, back in TCR, it is still a scrap at the front, half a second between those two. And deeper in the field, there's Murphy Nichols and Will Robbins. They have not totally sorted it out either. Robbins is still putting pressure on the 5 car, and they are running a couple tenths off the leader's pace at the moment.
Yeah, switching back and forth between the two, and this has been kind of the tune of some of the TCR battles we've seen this season. There are drivers who are the epitome of consistency. Tends to be, Elias Roman really dominated the season in that fashion because he was just more consistent than other drivers. Wasn't always the fastest, and a couple of drivers that we see on our screen, along with a number of other TCR drivers, are always super quick, but not necessarily perfectly consistent. And I think that's probably why they're just a little bit slower, a little further back every once in a while from that lead battle. It's also looking good. Lewis Alessi's up into 5th, and unless we missed it in qualifying, I think he qualified like 10th or 11th.
back
no.
in 7th, so he's climbed up a couple spots. You're right, it is still a very good run for Luis Alessi. He seems like he's improved a lot the latter half of the season, so I'd give him props on that for sure. He's actually looked like he might be closing in on those 2 in front of him. We'll keep an eye on it. Jack Christie's around. Looks like he'll be at the exit of turn 9 maybe. See how he got himself in this position. Easy to do here if you run a little wide. All by himself.
Yeah, you see the damage on the front of that car. Actually grabbed too much curb at the apex of turn 8. Looks like the car got away from him a little bit when he transitioned back for turn 9. He got a tank slapper moment and ran a little bit wide, which the grass sealed the deal on that big ride that he just went on, but keeps it off the walls. No more damage. So it's been a pretty dramatic race for the 6 car in the opening 20 or so minutes.
Let's talk about dramatic. Here's some battling here. Gross and Maloney in this shot. In front of them is the number 45 car. That's Darren Heath in 10th in TCR. So the middle of the packs both kind of going at it right now, lapping each other. And looks like Gross is going to open up a hole at the inside here and drive alongside under the bridge. Ryan Maloney's going to see this TCR car and want to get by him here, but sometimes it's better to be patient and do it on the straightaway.
Yeah, look at the speed of that TCR car through turn 10. That's going to be one of those situations where the downforce of the TCR car actually makes it just as fast through that corner until I get to the straightaway. So that's actually probably good news for everybody involved in this race, that the TCR cars are not particularly slow there. Ryan Maloney really didn't have to check up at all to get through turn 10 and then drove by them straightaway, easy peasy.
Deeper in the field. Here's Peter Lausen in TCR in 8th, Dave Fitzgerald in 9th. Fitzgerald started this race back in 16th place, so +7 for him. He'd like an 8th. Big bobble there by the 56. Gathers it back up and shoots off at turn 3. By some GT4 traffic. I think that's the 243. That's the 3rd place car. Kevin Zhu in GT4.
Let it move around on the brakes. Had to get that thing woed down big time between 2 TCR cars, trying not to get into the back of Lausen and the Bridgestone livery TCR car, but we're watching Kevin Zhu, who runs 3rd in the maroon BMW. More or less teammates with the 2nd place car of Alex LaRose, although this week they share different platforms. And now I think with all this traffic, honestly, Danny Gross closed up to Kevin Zhu in a big way.
Yeah, 0.7 of a second back now, and you see him close that gap even further as looks like Zhu got sort of trapped behind a TCR car in the entrance to turn number 10. Now going to have a little bit of slipstream, which will matter quite a bit here at some point.
Yeah, it's going to be a close call whether or not Gross can get by Lausen. Lausen in the orange Audi on the left. We ride with Gross. Here's the distance on the brakes. Gross throws it up the inside. Lausen opens the door for it to happen. It's good class communication between the two. But this battle for 3rd might continue to compress itself in GT4.
I was going to say, for the start that we had, a relatively frantic start, the multi-class interactions so far have been relatively tame, which is a pleasant surprise. I mean, it's still got a long way to go, but I think our first run through the field has been relatively without incident.
Lausen around the outside, down through turns 4 into 5. You called this a good passing opportunity, but it's so tough to pull off. Now Maloney is pinned around the outside of the first carousel into the 2nd. It becomes the inside, but he's lost a ton of ground. Look at the distance between him when we pan to Danny Gross, and then also Lausen getting stuck around the outside. Now has his mirrors full of, who's that, Dave Fitzgerald again, who got a little bit of a gift there. Look at the gap between Gross and Maloney now.
Under the bridge here on the backside of the racetrack, Jack Chrissy has made a pit stop. He's rejoined the racetrack right in the middle of TCR traffic between 6th place Scott Merker and 7th place Steve Muller. No battles at the front of the GT4 field, but I can tell you there is still quite a bit of shuffling happening. There's Danny Gross and Kevin Zhu. This battle for 3rd is going to get intense. See the headlights flashing. That is urgent message from Gross to the lap car that I'm coming through and I'm going to get it done now.
Yeah, it means wherever I put my car, I mean it. It's basically what that flashing light means. But Kevin Zhu lane changed across back to get to the preferred driving line and almost chucked it all in the grass. Had to get that thing woed up big time, and Danny Gross is coming for him. We're getting closer to the point.
Whoa, Zhu, big moment at the exit of turn 3, gathers it back up, great save. But here comes Danny Gross with a huge run through turn number 4, and that's going to close that gap up to essentially nothing.
So we're just under 50 minutes to go in this race, so we're right about a quarter in. And at this point, the BMW and Cayman are absolutely even. The BMW faster at the start. Through the middle of this race, they're going to be pretty similar, and the Cayman is going to have the upper hand on platform by the end of this race. And I'm talking tire wear, I'm talking balance. So the faster car, as long as the Cayman stays there, he will be in pretty good shape, but look at the power of the BMW. Still gets a good run through turn 9, up under the bridge towards turn 10, and Zhu gets a little bit of that back.
Yeah, Gross had a little bit of a bobble behind that M4, wasn't able to get back to power as quickly, so that just exacerbated the difference in the acceleration between the M4 and Cayman. Onto the front straightaway now, you mentioned it, under 50 minutes to go. And headlights flashing on the M4 now as we roll by some more TCR traffic. That's going to be a big dive. I don't think Gross can get there in time. He's going to open that door. That's the 31 car of Scott Merker, but he wasn't able to get alongside, and we'll have to pass him here on the straigaway on driver's right.
Yeah, you saw Merker saw the frantic situation unfolding and left the lane just in case Danny got a little too much gusto maybe on the brakes, but now they're unfortunately goes around the outside of turn 3. That's going to lose a lot of time. Whoa, Maloney got a big run, maybe shows the nose through the chute.
Maloney has a great run here into turn 5 on the brakes, going to cheat over back to the driver's right. Apex it nicely here, stays within about a half a car length of Danny Gross in that black and white Cayman. Zhu now running away, and all that mistake he made a lap and a half ago has sort of vanished with this battle going on behind him.
That's a perfect depiction of throughout this race, the drivers are not completely in control of how it's going to ebb and flow. Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. Look at Kevin Zhu grabbing curb on the inside, grabs a little bit of grass on the exit, big tank slap, loosens the hands up and lets it center back, saves that one.
That was another big moment there for Kevin Zhu. I thought we had to grab a look at. And Ken House Seal in TCR has extended his lead by about 0.7 of a second over Christopher Lapras. Will Robbins is 7 seconds back. He's running door-to-door with Murphy Nichols, and I think these guys have essentially given up on racing for that lead.
Yeah, they're just having the ball battling each other, and Murphy gets the outside run, has the nose ahead, and they're going to go single file down through turn 4 once again, but Robbins has made it back in front a couple of times, grabs grass on the way in and gets it woed down. That's a good save on a hairy moment.
Pulls it back left immediately, but this corner is so slow, you don't really need to cheat over to the left all that much. Murphy's going to take a bit of a run with them and try to drive away from this 35, but I imagine the slipstream will keep them close. 4.5 seconds back to find Louis Alessi, who continues to run times that are just off of these two. So if they get too rowdy, that could pull in another car into this battle. Looks like Don Manning is headed back to the pits. I don't know if there was an accident on the racetrack. There certainly was. This is a big one as well. Here's a look at it.
Through the final corner, gets it into the dirt. It's just really tough to predict where the car is going to go. That's a impact on the level of Alessandrini on the first lap, and hood flies up. Manning does a good job to keep it off of the track in case other cars were coming, but calls it a day.
Yeah, ends up on the barrier on the side of the racetrack. Checking back in at the front of our GT4 field, Jonathan White still working through some traffic. This is the battle for third in TCR that he's making his way through now, so has not quite lapped every driver in the TCR grid. And Alex LaRose has fallen about 2.5 seconds back, could use this opportunity to gain some ground.
See how patient Jonathan White was there. He could have forced the issue. Even here, he could be forcing the issue with Murphy Nichols, but it's just not worth it at this point in the race. You have so much time left, so much race to go, that if you make a mistake this early on, you just can't recover from it. But it's very easy to stay patient and just make it work. I say it's very easy to do. It's easy in theory. It's not easy in practice, because right now you can see on your screen Jonathan White is hemorrhaging time to Alex LaRose, who's almost cut that lead back down in half through that entire exchange.
More than half, actually. About 2 full seconds he pulled off of that lead. That will help LaRose immensely, and even White's going to lose some momentum here, and LaRose is going to carry all of it onto the front straight and get some slipstream. This gap will be under a second by the end of the front straightaway. 45 minutes to go, and under a second for both of our class leaders.
That could really be a race-changing lap. You take a note of whatever lap that was. That might be the race-changing shape where Alex LaRose is now absolutely back in touch with Jonathan White, and 45 minutes yet to go. This battle for third in TCR is going to stay this way the entire length, I think.
GT4 car opened up the door for Will Robbins to follow him on through. Didn't go for it. Here's a battle for 11th. There's Darian Taggart in the 9. We saw him looped around earlier. Bob Shoemaker in the 55 car has slid back to 12th. Third place in GT4. Kevin Zhu now behind a TCR car. That's Louis Alessi. Danny Gross going to close back up here.
Yeah, 3 cars in GT4, nose to stern, line of stern, I should say. That's Rose in the maroon car. We ride with Gross, and just behind, out of shot, but totally pressuring. There he is Ryan Maloney, and then a lapped car just behind. So these guys are all going to be super patient through these S's. I mentioned in qualifying, turns 4 to turn 9 are pretty much single file, and this is what it looks like when you're just stuck waiting. Danny Gross hanging back for a run. Did he get a good one? Ooh, it's going to be tight going into the final corner.
Alongside, he's going to try to get there. Oh, big dive on the brakes, and he's through. That was a great aggressive move. It's going to cost him time on the front straightaway, Tom. But I think he got the job done. There's a car returning to the racetrack. That is Don Manning. Here comes Ryan Maloney, 3 wide up the inside in the grass on the front straightaway.
You see these cars barely fit 3 wide across this front straightaway. Don Manning looking to slow down early on. Whoa, actually picks Ryan Maloney just a little bit. It's a big ride for Jack Chrissy in the background, goes flying off the track, but everybody in the battle for 3rd, 4th, and 5th in GT4 comes through clean.
That was a very hairy moment for a bunch of different people. They got it, woed back up. Not done yet. Maloney still pressuring Danny Gross and forcing mistakes out of him. And Zoo's been making his own mistakes. Gross has been feeling the pressure and making his own as well. But look at the 28 car, the run he gets out of turn 3.
So the dabbing of the brakes to the Cayman, trying to keep the nose down, the mid-engine platform rotating through the high speed of turn 4 before finally diving on the brakes for these 2 back-to-back carousels. Really where you're just kind of cutting distance, waiting. And these are the corners where the GT4 cars are just a little bit too powerful and a little bit too awkward to get through there comfortably. You see Maloney fighting the wheel. You want it to be fast, but it just isn't.
Oh, he's a little bit wide, too much speed. He'll back it down, pull it back on course. Meanwhile, in 3rd place in TCR, once again, Robbins and Nichols, they were going at it. They were less than a 10th apart coming out of turn 9. It's grown just a little bit. There is 3rd place Kevin Zhu, and that battle continues behind him.
I was going to say, that's just in front of the cars we were just watching. So now these cars are going to overlap. That's the battle for 3rd in both classes coming together. Zhu has a nice little gap, so he can be patient or aggressive if he likes when he catches these TCR cars. But unfortunately, he's going to catch them just as they exit turn 3 towards turn 4, where the track becomes
prohibitively tight.
Tight is the perfect way to put that.
Through turn 3, look at the Will Robbins cheating over to the left just to get the nose out. Get out of the mirrors. Big slide for Zhu at the exit of turn 3. And again, this is the worst place you could catch traffic at this track. And he's going to have to sit on it. He knows that. There's no advantage to trying to chuck it up the inside here. He's going to sit and wait. It's going to cost him time, but it's the only thing he can do. Now, looks like Will Robbins is going to make a mistake, and Zhu will try to go through it.
That's an uncommon place to get a gift like that, but Zhu's going to get through, and now Gross runs wide in the 2nd carousel into the S's now. They accelerate, grab a couple of gears, but we're going to see Zhu get a little bit of a gift of some gap as he pulls away from Will Robbins. Gross actually gets a pretty good run off of turn 9 and will be able to get this pass done before turn 10, I think.
Gift to gap this holiday season as Danny Gross goes through. Wanted to check out Scott Merker in the 31 car. He has found his way to pit lane with a hellacious-looking incident. Here's a look. Peter Lausen going to get in the back of him. This is going to hurt Tom across the racetrack. Oh,
that's a huge impact. And Jack Chrissy, who's had a ton of drama tonight, almost was collected in that one. But Lausen changing lanes back across. Maybe a little bit of an internet connection issue between those two, as there was not heavy impact. I think Lausen probably just thought he was clear.
Let's listen to this. We're right on board with Merker as well. Now you can't stop.
Yeah, harmless touch turns into a not so harmless impact, and unfortunately Merker's back to the pit lane, and Lausen continues his challenging charge towards the top 5.
Checking in on Ken Halseal, who is your race leader in TCR. Lapras half a second back. No major battle has happened here in a while. There is Jonathan White and Alex LaRose. Battle in GT4, though, is pretty warm.
I was going to say, look how close they are. They're equally close between the two, but I think in TCR it's a little more complicit than this one would be. If Alex LaRose can get towards the front and attack Jonathan White, there's absolutely no reason not to. He needs to start to get towards the front. He needs to get around and start to gap Jonathan White, if anything else.
Into turn 1, a pop out of line. That's Lapras on Halseal. He's through, but he's in too deep. White up the inside. Oh, it was almost 3 wide. Halseal backed out of it. Slides in behind the 25 car. And you mentioned complicit. That was about as complicit as that was going to get, although LaRose is now stuck behind a 2-car tango for the top spot in TCR.
Yeah, and pretty surprised to see Lapras with that big lunge, but he made it work. And wow, now Ken Halseal has the run. He dropped the tire towards turn 4. Halseal up the inside, trail braking for both of them through the corner. That's how tight it can get. Now Halseal has the outside,
they
touch to the inside, and they go for a big slide into the dirt.
Halseal off track as they battle for the race lead in TCR. Trouble for the front runners.
That was all his own doing. I don't think there was contact. If there was, it might have been another one of those internet connection issues. We'll see the gap between the doors of the two cars. Look how close it is. They're easily, comfortably close. Oh man, there was room there on the screen, but unfortunately what we call netcode here in iRacing, they didn't know exactly where they were on the internet, and the internet makes the contact.
I'll basically explain netcode is essentially the internet is not fast enough to do multiplayer in real time. So iRacing actually does a predictive analysis of where your car is going to go based on your inputs now, and sometimes that prediction is just a little bit wrong, and that's what we saw there. But iRacing does a spectacular job, and probably the most fluid motion that you can get in an online racing simulator. However, when it gets it wrong, it can be frustrating. So Hausil and Lapras now separated by 3 seconds, and LaRose and White now separated by 2 seconds. So both of our lead battles, as they inter-spliced, have separated just slightly. Back in third place, though, Murphy Nichols and Will Robbins, they've got another GT4 car behind them, and that is Andrew Kessel, who has dropped off of the battle for third place and runs all by himself in sixth. Car off, that's the 34 car. That's a big hit for somebody. What car is that? That's Daniel Huertas. Big damage on his machine.
He did that on his own, yeah, certainly. He's coming into turn 3, just ahead of Ken Hausil. So he's between the two leaders in TCR, runs it a bit wide. And an odd incident for a front-wheel drive car to go spearing off the track like that, but the walls are close here at Summit Point. Unfortunately, not enough room for error for Huertas.
Get back rolling now, down in 11th spot in class. Check back in on our third place battle. This is the closest one on the racetrack at the moment. It is a 3-horse fight. It is BMW Cayman in this shot. In the background, you see Kessel getting by Nichols and Robbins in third in TCR. Look at Zhu up the inside, had a look at the race leader, or the second place driver in TCR, couldn't complete it.
So on your screen right now, the blue car of Ken Hausil sits second in TCR, and then we're watching third, fourth, and fifth in GT4, starting with Kevin Zhu. Ryan Maloney's in the Castrol car, and then Danny Gross in the Porsche Cayman. Zhu is going to try this run up to turn 3, almost shoves Ken Hausil wide, does so just a little bit. And something we haven't talked about much, I'll come back to it as this action finishes, but Maloney around the outside now. Danny Gross maybe gets a look as well, tries it to follow Maloney through into the turn 4 carousel, and Gross is not going to get there. He's going to have to be stuck around the outside of Ken Hausil, who's doing everything he can to not lose time with these GT4 cars, aggressively attacking him, because don't forget, Hausil just got pushed off the track for second and is now trying to work his way back towards Lapras.
Very delicately on throttle there. He's going to lose some time. Look at Maloney hanging the rear end of that M4 out, trying to gather some momentum and some speed to catch that 243 car. Gross is through Hausil behind him, but did lose some ground in that battle. The twin M4s on the front straightaway, slipstreaming. Cars rejoining the racetrack in front of him.
I think that's Huertas. But coming back to what I was thinking of, this race has an incident limit, and in iRacing, while we're talking about sim racing specifics, there are incident points at play here. If you drop a tire into the gravel or off the track limits, it's 1 point. If you spin or lose control of your car, it's 2 points. And if you make contact heavily with another car, it's 4 points. And those accumulate throughout this race. And in this race, there is a maximum of 40 allowed before you get a drive-through penalty. And with how tight things have been for some of these drivers, how dramatic some of their nights have been, with 36 minutes to go, staying under that 40 limit is going to be a little challenging for some of these drivers. So they have to be careful with using those as a resource. Some of the drivers are really good at using them up when they need to and saving them for when they don't. Other drivers, if you lose track of your points early on, it can be a little tough to stay clean in the later stages of the race.
I mentioned that incident limit, and turn 3 is perhaps the best example of a place you can get one of those incident points. As we look at the racetrack here, basically everything from the curbing on over is off-track area. You're not allowed to drive on that, and you're going to see almost every driver coming through here, especially on the race start. They're going to track out wide just to carry a little bit more speed. The other place I'm thinking is maybe at the exit of turn number 10. There's a little bit of rumble strip out beyond that curbing, but beyond that, you see there's actually tire marks in the gravel, people extending those track limits just to carry a little bit more speed, as you see the 77 to Colin Daner do there.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't have full control of that. What made me think of it was Ken Hausil getting pushed out at turn 3, and where he was on the track, he absolutely got an incident point for that. So if those start to rack up for drivers like Hausil, who have been off the track a couple of times, had some contacts a couple of times here and there, you're going to have to be more careful than others maybe. He now runs peacefully alone, probably cherishing this moment to regroup himself before Andrew Kessel, who sits 6th in GT4, catches him.
Well, you mentioned treating incidents as a resource, and I think that's how most drivers look at it. They say, hey, I get 40 opportunities to run a little bit wide and carry some speed, and they're going to use up those 40 as a resource that they have, and basically an extra little cheat code that you can run a little bit wide and carry some speed. And you plan on using all of those, or at least you should be planning on using all of those. But if something unexpected happens, it throws off your whole strategy, and if you get ahead of yourself in those, you can't erase them, so you're stuck with them, and you have to drive very conservatively to make it to the end without accumulating a penalty. Meanwhile, for third in GT4, this is getting really dicey here.
The run Maloney was potentially on for until he got pinned behind behind the TCR car. That's the leader, 25 car, who's leading the race, Chris Lapras. Dramatic moments. And look at Maloney. He's 3 wide right now with Gross. Gross had a killer run through the final corner and is deep on the brakes in the Cayman. Can he complete the pass before the apex? No. This is going to stay side by side on the run towards turn 3.
Kevin Zhu likes watching this in the mirror here, but it might be out his side window here in a moment. Maloney and Gross battling door to door, side by side towards turn number 3 here at 7th Point. Just over a half hour remaining. Maloney squeezes through. Gross is going to have to back out and try this again here in a moment.
That's the challenge that these Porsches face. They just don't have enough oomph down the straightaways to deal with the BMWs sometimes, and Gross has to reset once again. Maloney wasn't able to do anything with that one. It looked like he had a run for a moment, but Zhu continues to lead this one, handling the pressure beautifully, I must say, in the 243, but Maloney is looking quick. Don't forget, he's a previous race winner this season.
Saw a little bit of rear tire slide out of the 28 car. Gross chasing this pair of M4s. They're both a little bit wide, but they just get such a good run. And Gross has to carry all the speed in the section that you can't make passes here at 7th Point. The M4s are better in the places that matter.
A little bit of a push on the entry there for Gross as well, and that one's going to hurt. Look at the 2-3 car links already before the start-finish line even happens here at Summit Point. Zhu still a lot of pressure from Maloney as they start another lap. 32 minutes to go now.
Into turn 1, it's so easy to outbrake yourself here too. This corner is remarkably tight. You're basically in low second gear. Some drivers in other cars might even go down to first there. It's a really tight corner. You're coming in there at 150 miles an hour. You're using every bit of the braking systems in these cars, and if you miss it by an inch, you're outbraked yourself by a mile. Up over the curb, Maloney using that to help rotate the car around. You mentioned the curbing here. Summit Point has some of the most inconsistent curbing of any racetrack here at iRacing. Some curbs you can drive all over, they're perfectly flat. Others are 5 inches, 6 inches high. And every corner is a little bit different in how you attack it, how you approach it with that curbing to gain some speed. Look at Danny Gross closing in again in the tight twisties.
I think it's pretty apparent the Cayman is really strong through this section, but this section is just so tight and narrow, it's tough to go anywhere with. So that's the strategy for this race. You call it an enduro. There's no strategy on the track. It was the strategy and car choice, really, coming into this one. Do you want the car that's easy to defend but hard to drive, or do you want the faster car, the Cayman, that's good on the long run, but tough to do anything with that speed sometimes?
Onto the front straightaway now. Kevin Zhu trying to hold back the floodwaters of Maloney and Gross.
Just look down. As we watch this battle for third, the TCR battle for third is also not gone anywhere. Less than 2/10 separating them as they stream onto the front straightaway. Murphy Nichols in the red, blue, and white car. Now we look at the back of that car with Will Robbins, who sits fourth. There's a straight line speed difference. The GT4 car zooms past and deep on the brakes. The TCR car is so good on the brakes. Murphy's one of the best in the business on the brakes as well, and he holds the position around the outside. Doesn't lose much time there.
Chad Griffith going by in 8th place. Haven't really talked about Chad a whole lot today, but started this race in 8th, and that's exactly where he's running. So about 45 minutes into this race, it feels like he's gone pretty much nowhere. But having a pretty clean race so far, not a scratch on that M4. I'm sure he'd like to keep it that way. Murphy Nichols, you mentioned how good he is on the brakes. He just stands that thing up on the badge on the front. Rear tires come up off the ground. So I feel like it's going to cartwheel every time he goes off into the corners with how much play you see in the front suspension. And back up to third in GT4. Look at this, nose to tail. Working onto the front straightaway. This is going to be a really good run for Maloney. He's going to have a look here.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him pop out at the last second. The Duck staring back at him. There he goes, up the inside. Zhu protects, moves him to the center of the track, pinches him on the entry, and Zhu probably knows if he can hold the outside, he's golden. Doesn't get it done. They're deep on the brakes. Zhu runs a little bit wide, but closes the door around the outside and gets the better run. Wow, Every inch almost off the track, but keeps it flowing. And Zoo continues to run third.
The other interesting thing about this, again, we're running on a laser scanned version of Summit Point Raceway. It's from a long time ago, but back then in turn 1, it was extraordinarily bumpy. You saw the inside car, Ryan Maloney, kind of skipping and hopping over those bumps, couldn't get the power down, and the traction control of these cars can be pretty invasive sometimes, Tom. So will you be playing with that inside the car, or is he going to leave that at a certain setting and just roll with it?
Well, unfortunately for the GT, whoa, Danny Gross makes a mistake deep into the second carousel and almost collects Maloney. But back to your question, unfortunately for all these drivers, in the BMWs anyway, it is either yes or no. It's not a dial, I don't believe. So it's either yes, I would like some traction control, or no, sir, I would not like some traction control. The Cayman does have a level, and you tend to run it somewhere in the middle of the dial.
It's also, isn't the Cayman's tied with the ABS as well, or is that changed?
Yes, it is tied to the ABS. So these cars are very much more street oriented with their driver aids than you would see in either the TCR cars if they have them, or something like a GT3 car. But these guys are doing a fine job managing it either way. That really is one of those more street car situations where if the driver aids are interfering, you made a mistake. They're not helping you like they do in a GT3 car. So Kevin Zhu, when he gets that car sideways, you see the traction control maybe helping him out a little bit. It's not making him faster.
It's probably just saving you from crashing, which for some might view as an advantageous thing, but it's certainly not making you go harder. Ryan Maloney off into the gravel just a little bit.
Pushing so hard, and I have to imagine maybe getting a little frustrated. So he's just waiting for the opportunity to make an attack on Kevin Zhu, and he's had a couple of them, but just not able to seal the deal. How quick Danny Gross is on this one. He's actually running tighter lines, just tighter and tidier around the entire carousel.
Francois Brou off in turn number 1, it looks like. We'll have a quick look at how he was charging into turn 1. Have a look here.
This is the battle for third in TCR, and he's trying to get by both of them in one fell swoop. And swoops himself straight into the gravel trap at turn 1.
And they're too hot. Does he get the barrier just slightly? Be a pretty sizable hit to that left front. Shouldn't affect it too much as we go back to this battle. I don't want to look away from this, because we're going to look away and someone will be upside down in the tree, so I don't want to disappear. Under a half hour remaining in this race into turn 1. Kevin Zhu, you mentioned how cool he was under pressure. He's made a couple mistakes, but nothing definitive enough to let Maloney by, so he's done a spectacular job here at driving tonight.
He's also done a good job of putting the car in a situation where he can maintain the advantage. Saw him not really protect the inside of turn 1. He let Maloney go up the inside, knowing that the outside tends to be the better choice, which is not always the case. And most of the times you want the inside for a corner because that's the preferred driving line. But here at Summit Point, with the flow and the bumps, as you mentioned, it's better to get the outside. So I think Jonathan White looks like he's quicker in certainly the final corner. If he can get a run maybe through turn 9 through the S's, if he can get the job done down through turn 10 onto the front straightaway, he might be able to start to build a little bit of a gap to Zhu. But Zhu looks pretty unshakable at this point.
Oh, a nice line there for Ryan Maloney. Zhu made a bit of a mistake. Here they are side by side at the exit of turn 9. This is going to be a great run for Maloney, but even better so for Danny Gross, as these two, if they run into turn 10 side by side, it's going to crush their momentum for the front straight. Here they go.
Not often as a commentator you get to say something and it manifests, but Maloney tried it, and unfortunately fortunately for Maloney, fortunately for Zhu, responded perfectly to the pressure, and now Gross has the run out the inside lane.
He should be able to complete this pass. The Cayman's pretty good, but Maloney's pretty good on the outside lane too, so can Gross complete this here? He's going to try, and he does. Moves into 4th.
A little bit of a mistake from Zhu, and it's going to be okay. He puts the power down and uses the extra oomph to close the door back. But Gross, up one position, now finds himself in a BMW sandwich, the meet Porsche in the middle.
This is probably a bit of a better spot.
Porsche beat. There we go.
Probably a bit of a better spot to be than behind all this, because now he can kind of play defense as well, and kind of use maybe a push from that M4 to potentially get up alongside that 243. That's going to be tight within itself. 3.5 seconds between the two race leaders in front of them. They are 11 seconds up the road. No major battles happening in TCR except for Steve Muller and Dave Fitzgerald, but this battle's just a little bit tighter and more dynamic, so we're going to stay on board with these guys.
I am just, we don't need to cut to it, but I'm watching the battle, or the difference between Christopher Lapras and Ken Hausil, it's halved in the last couple of laps. So Hausil is certainly charging back towards Christopher Lapras, and we'll keep an eye on when that battle gets close. But look at Zhu, finally makes a mistake.
There goes Zhu off in the final corner. Oh, he's going to lose it. Oh, he gathers it back up. That was a big moment. And here comes Maloney to driver's left now to grab that spot away. So that was a huge, huge mistake for Zhu that almost ended up having him in the pit lane barrier. Here's a look.
Sweeps to the final corner, too much inside curb, and just goes off the gravel, and this is where the cars get really challenging to hang on to. You see him trying really hard to ease the car back onto the track, but fights it there, finally gathers it up, and I can't express to you how challenging it is to maintain your cool for the amount of pressure that he had on his back bumper for the number of laps. Not a surprise to see his mistake finally happen there, and he's lucky that it didn't do him any more damage. He's still in this fight.
He had very quick hands to hold on to that big mistake, so he is back to 5th place now. Put Danny Gross at the front of this, and he should be able to hopefully run away. I think he was the quickest car in this group. He was just held back by the M4s in the slower portions, so Gross should be able to run away at this point. We'll check back in a little while. Meanwhile, in 11th place, Darian Taggart, Richard Spicer. We haven't talked about Spicer a whole lot. In the past, he's been a little bit more competitive in this series, but tonight hasn't had much pace. Runs in 12th right now after starting in 14th.
Oh, commentator curse. We cut to him, and he goes for a big slide, grabs some grass on the way into turn 3, and unfortunately loses the touch with Darian Taggart, but keeps it off the walls.
There goes Peter Lausen on by and runs in 6th in TCR. And you mentioned the battle between Lapras and Hausil. I'm just keeping an eye on their lap times here. Let's see what they are as they come across the line. This time through for Lapras, it's going to be a 1:17.561 for Ken Hausil. It's a 1:17.454, so a 10th gain. But it's been a little bit fluid the last few laps.
It has, but again, it's halved in the last 10 to 15 minutes. It was down. Whoa, Hausil, a little bit of mistake. Grabs dirt on the way into the turn 1 and has to throw a bunch of opposite lock into it while still on the brakes, but gathers it up. So I think we might see a couple of tenths advantage back to Lapras. Back to our favorite battle to keep an eye on, Danny Gross, Ryan Maloney, and riding on board with Kevin Zhu, who flopped from 3rd to 5th in the last couple of laps.
He was right there heading into turn 5 and lost some momentum through the middle of 5.
Just listen to the throttle management through this whole section. You think it's fast S's, but it's really not. Oh, Maloney's super on the limit all the way out to the grass, and now the run up under the bridge.
Into the braking zone now for turn number 10. Looks like Maloney missed the apex just a little bit, as did Zhu. Carrying speed out to track edge and onto the front straightaway. Richard Spicer off again. Probably found his way off track this time. This is down in turn number 1. Very similar, it looks like, to Francois Broux's mistake. Again, I mentioned earlier, you missed the braking zone for turn 1 and you might actually get just runs off.
It's interesting. It looks like he had made the corner and then gave up. Pulls to a stop.
Back rolling now. I'm not exactly sure what that was all about. And that's a big moment for the 31 car. Scott Merker getting shuffled through the GT4 field.
Good move from Maloney. Shoved it up there and made it work. But it was a hairy moment on the exit of turn 3. Got himself a little bit closer to Danny Gross, a little further away from Kevin Zhu. Now there's the gap between them, almost equidistant at about 3 car lengths each.
Through the backside of the racetrack now in TCR. We haven't seen a big shuffle in a little while. It's been GT4, about 3rd place battle that has been the exciting one so far. Big jump over the curb for Kevin Zhu. And the fear of the situation for Kevin Zhu now is you're out behind the guys that you were fighting. Did he burn up those tires running defensively, and will he be able to catch back up to Maloney? That's yet to be seen. He was faster last time by. I think he lost a little bit of ground this time. 2.5 seconds between our GT4 leaders. Jonathan White has had a relatively quiet night after the initial lap contact. DJ Alessandrini sort of, I thought maybe had cheated over a little bit too far to the right and kind of turned himself off the nose of the 22. We did take a look at it. I'll have to go back again later and look, but it seemed to me like Alessandrini came across the nose of the 22. And ever since that contact, it's been White out front. He has led every lap we've run so far, which has been 40 laps completed, and about 58 estimated that we'll complete here tomorrow.
See that car just completely clean, not a scratch on it. He's in a very fortunate position where he can pick and choose his battles when he wants to, and we saw how patient he was about 20 minutes ago as he almost waited the entire duration of a lap to make a move on some of the TCR traffic before he finally made it happen. And LaRose had closed the gap up big time, but now it's sitting back at about 3 seconds between the two of them.
Keep an eye on the lap times here. Jonathan White's last lap was a 1:15.959. For Alex LaRose, it was a 1:15.8. We'll see if they're back on. Now that time, White gained a half a second, so it seems like it's kind of pinballing back and forth just a little bit. Now this is one of those lull periods where there's not really a lot happening on the racetrack right now. We've kind of gotten everybody sorted, and it's just sort of single cars making the multi-class efforts right now. But 20 minutes to go at Summit Point. 20 minutes left in the racing season for the DC Region Winter Series. Kevin Zhu is closing back up on Maloney again.
Haven't talked about it yet because the battles have been so good, but the tire wear on the BMW is definitely going to start to be a factor here, as is the tire wear on the on the TCR cars. The front tires on the TCR cars, the rear tires on the BMW, or really all the tires on the BMW. So Maloney's continuing to push super hard. Look how much curb he's using. He's got that car squirming and wiggling all over the place in certain sections. And that's probably just to keep the momentum up, because at this point in the race, the tires are starting to scream for mercy.
Just kind of watching, this is always the part where the car can get sideways. You're kind of jumping curbs and trying to sling it through, kind of threading the needle there between those curbs. Kevin Zhu, a little bit more effective that time. Well, of the 34 cars that took the green flag, we have 28 of them on the racetrack. I should say 25 of them on the racetrack. There are, looks like 11 GT4 cars on the lead lap. Who else is a lap down to the race leader? And the GT4 leader is about halfway through the TCR field on its second trip around the clock. So there's Peter Lausen, and Jonathan White is about to put a second lap down.
Makes his move early, makes his intentions known. It's a smart move for Jonathan White to communicate clearly to the drivers around him, but he puts himself in a really challenging spot. That's a lot of trust between the two of them. Lausen keeps it in his lane, and White is through. Now it's probably a whole lap or more of clear traffic. Look at the big empty space between them.
Will Robbins, sorry to cut you off, Tom. Will Robbins is in pit lane. So is another driver. Didn't catch who that was. Scott Merker potentially. Will Robbins off track at the exit at turn 9. Big tank slapper. And he's going to end up off the racetrack. That is unfortunate.
Through the trees and back to the pit lane for the driver that was battling heavily for third for a long time in this race.
It's unfortunate. No walls over there. You end up in the trees and you get reset back to the pits. I don't know. Is that still the way it is in real life?
No, that never. You don't get automatically reset.
No, that's not what I meant. You just enter the void.
Yeah,
race car purgatory.
No, I actually have not been to Summit Point, so I don't know.
Oh,
this is one of the only tracks.
Summit Point?
Yeah, one of the only in North America I have not been to.
We had a whole list of tracks that Tom had been to, and pretty much every one that you can think of you had been to. I guess Summit Point we just completely glossed over.
This is probably one of the highlight tracks of the country that I've not been to. The rest are small obscure tracks, but everyone knows Summit Point. Yeah, little old me, not been there, but all these guys are looking like experts for the most part. Maloney's really quick. He's closing back up on Gross. As I talked about that tire wear, he doesn't seem to care. He's got a lot of pinks left in this 28.
Lifting very early into turn 4. Slow in, fast out. That's sort of the prophecy. Danny Gross a little bit hard charging into turn 5. The car understeered for a little bit. That could be scrubbing off those front tires. Maybe he's driving a little bit too aggressively right now and burning up what's left in those Michelins out in front. Down through the rest of the field. This is the closest battle on the racetrack for position. Third place Danny Gross and fourth place Ryan Maloney in the GT4 category.
Just an update at the front of TCR. Hauseil's actually lost about a half a second to Christopher Lapras. There's Lapras now. So Hauseil can see him, and that's motivating to a point, but Lapras is really lapping quickly. And every time, where's the last time through? Yeah, Lapras was almost a half a second faster last time through. And Hauseil is having a hard time making any progress after he had charged, maybe used up a little too much of those front tires in the last 20 minutes.
So Hauseil, for the driver I thought would be the favorite tonight, after things got shuffled, there was contact in turn 5 about 20 minutes ago that has put Hauseil on the back foot. Now through comes Ryan Daner in the 33, and he's got, looks like Jack Chrissy tucked in behind him. Hauseil will continue to lose time to Christopher Lapras. It's a 4-second difference between those two right now. On top of that, he's being held up more by GT4 traffic with the multi-class interaction, so he'll get shoved down a little bit further.
Yeah, things can move really, really quickly here. If there's a lap where you lose a couple of corners of advantage to the next car around, you hear Ken Hauseil just pounding the curbs and slamming down as he cuts through turn 3 into turn 4. But what I was going to say is it's always surprising how quickly you could lose time. If Lapras gets caught up with a couple of GT4 cars, maybe making some boneheaded moves, not the best thought out moves, he can lose that 3.5 seconds so quickly.
Andrew Kessel and Ryan Daner Colin Daner in the 77 closing in. And the M4 pokes a big hole in the air. That Porsche fits pretty nicely into it. It's like putting a cell phone in a refrigerator box. There's plenty of space behind that air wake of the M4, and up the inside, Daner's going to squeeze by the 45 of Darren Heath.
It's well played there, both of them making it through without much interruption to their overall pace. And Daner's got some good momentum swinging his way within a second of Andrew Kessel.
Stopped. Taberzi, the 24. Did he spin on entry, or did he just come to a stop here?
Looks like he saw some of the faster cars coming through. Yeah, he saw the battle for GT4,
Yeah.
3rd, 4th, and 5th coming, and pulled off the grass to allow them to get through nice and easily, which is a little overly courteous, but very gentlemanly.
In the real world, you probably wouldn't do that just because you get a local caution, and then they couldn't complete the pass. We've seen that, not intentionally happen. We've seen local cautions be a problem this season, this racing season. I really wish, I wonder, when we finally get marshals that can actually wave flags here in iRacing, if we'll see local cautions actually get enforced, which would be an interesting dynamic. I know there's problems with how do you know that the pass was not a car that was involved in an accident, all that sort of things.
Colin Daner was absolutely on the limit. Had half the car in the dirt coming off of turn 10. Lost a little bit of gap to Andrew Kessel, but he's pushing so hard in that 77 car. Deep on the brakes down into turn 1. Car looks cool too.
It does look cool. They're dangling the carrot with Kessel just up the road, and he wants to go take a bite out of him, but it's gained about a second to get there.
Lost 4/10 on that mistake in turn 10, so he's got a little bit of a reset to do. At the front, Jonathan White still almost 5 seconds up the road from Alex LaRose. The battle for 3rd has not gone much of anywhere between Danny Gross and Ryan Maloney, but look at Kevin Zoo's actually out of touch with that one, about 2 seconds back, so he might have not necessarily rallied the mistakes that he started to make, might have made another one, and now sits a lonely 5th.
He's all by himself now. No friends to come to the dinner table and party. What that was all about. Jonathan White out front by 4.3. You can see, LaRose can see him off in the distance, Tom, and he is running quicker. That was a 6/10 gain. Actually, no, that was a 3/10 gain that time, 6/10 to the previous lap. LaRose is running quicker than Jonathan White, but is this enough time left? 12.5 minutes. That's about 10 laps here at Summit Point. 4 seconds? I don't see that happening.
Well, if it's 10 laps, he's got 4.5 tenths to go. My college dropout math says he needs to take at least that, if not more, out every single lap. He needs to take close to a half second every single lap, so that's going to be a tall order, as consistent as Jonathan White's been. Also in TCR, Ken Hosiel has lost a ton more time to Chris Lapras, so Lapras is probably sitting pretty comfortable. He can afford to pick and choose his battles in a big way at this point. Both battles in the lead sit at just almost 5 seconds.
See what he's doing there. He's actually letting one of the GT4 cars by. That looks to be Jack Christie. Let him by on driver's left just in case he got to the corner. He wasn't offline, so good move there. For Lapras, he remains 4.3 seconds out in front. Keeping an eye on other battles throughout this field. Dave Fitzgerald, the 91 car. Haven't spoken a whole lot about him today, but 16th to 6th, plus 10 for him in the category. That's a great climb. Mahler behind him. They battled a little bit earlier in the race. It's Mahler in the 49 car. About 12 minutes to go. 10 laps left in this event, and Jonathan White was right back on pace. The 1:15.1 gained back the time that LaRose gained the lap prior, so I don't see this lead really shifting around all that much. At least not consistently in one direction. White has had a pretty easy day. Now just imagine how things would have been different if Alessandrini hadn't gotten wrecked on the opening lap time. That would have totally changed how this race looked.
Yeah, that's not the first time this season we've seen lap 1 occurrences change the shape of a race we thought we were going to get. It's Darian Taggart letting the leader go through, so Jonathan White gets an open door and makes it easy to get around some lap traffic in GT4, but starts to pull up. On 10 minutes to go. See just how composed the 22 still looks. He's not overexerting anything, not asking too much of that car. There's LaRose, pops into the background for just a moment, and I completely agree. Unless there's some major interference between the two, The Rose is hovering at the same pace, but it's not going to be anywhere near enough to get there.
Unlikely. And in TCR, everyone's pretty much found their own room to race. They're pretty much just hot lapping at this point. Houseel was slightly quicker last time by, but the same story here as it is in GT4, where the second place driver might be gaining some ground here or there, but loses it on the other lap. So it really is not trending in any specific direction for either of these two fields. And right now, it all just comes down to, is something going to create some chaos in the final couple laps? This race, other than the start, has been very calm. That just goes to show you how good these drivers are.
Yeah, I've been impressed. I mean, throughout the season, I mentioned it at the top of the broadcast that we've had some of the highest quality racing throughout this season, and they've handled this particularly challenging combo extremely well, with the to be expected little hiccups on the first lap or two.
I don't think we've seen any multi-class crashes today. All the classes have been within their own class.
I mean, I wouldn't say that with 10 minutes to
are
go
you
now, but yeah, I see your point. But your point before was that it's going to take a catalyst to change anything in the race at this point, and we'll knock on wood that doesn't happen for everybody's sake. But things have evened out pretty quickly. Although, look at this, LaRose just closed over a second.
Yeah,
that last time through. Jonathan White is absolutely taking his time getting by drivers that he's coming across.
He's got time to burn, though. I don't think there's really any necessarily any rush for him to get through. That 3.5 seconds is not going to disappear in a lap. It could disappear over the course of several, but he can force the issue anytime he wants. This is getting a little spicy up at the front here.
Yeah, the only cars that are still really close to each other, the 2 and the 28, you're looking at them right there. We're riding on board with Ryan Maloney, looking at the back of Danny Gross. This is for the final podium position in GT4. Gross is taking a high-risk move right now up the inside of Lewis Alessi in the TCR car. Lewis opens the door for both drivers to get through. Good to see that awareness. And Maloney loses a car length or 2, but is still within touch. And this is the only one on the ticker that I can see that isn't done yet.
There's a 55 car right in front of him. That is Bob Shoemaker in the Tire Rack BMW right in front. He might be a little bit of a roadblock here for Danny Gross and bring Maloney right back into this, but this is not where the M4 is strong. That might be an advantage for Danny Gross, but he's going to get stuck side by side through here. Maloney sees the opportunity, slams over the curbing, but now he's going to be held up by the 55.
They're in short shift and try to hang off just a little bit to get a run. He's got it. Pokes to the inside of the 55. The 55 is not making it easy. And Maloney gets through just on entry to turn 10. So that's actually a little bit of a favor, a little bit of a nod in favor of Ryan Maloney, I should say, towards the back of Danny Gross, and the BMW's quick down these straightaways. It doesn't need to draft off the Porsche much. It still is going to pull up some close distance.
Down the front straightaway, Maloney was quicker that time by 0.3 of a second into the braking zone here. Trying to keep it tucked neat and tidy. You see the rubbered in line starting to form on the outside. A lot of drivers have been kind of rim riding the exit of this corner. You can see the rubber line here as well. You want to stay on the darkened part of the racetrack. You see Gross just kind of sort of missing the apex there, tracking that little wide. Maloney off in the dirt. This is going to get racy here, Tom, before this doesn't.
Yeah, Maloney smells blood and water, and Gross has done a good job to stay consistent enough, but made a couple of mistakes those last times through. I think that charge that he tried to get through the lapped traffic on was also bold, if not necessarily a little bit of a mistake in the choice of where he went. But Ryan Maloney is still lurking in the background, the BMW ominous with those glowing headlights.
Saw the 28's rear tires lighten up a little bit, had the car a little bit sideways, tracks out to the curb on the exit of 9. Certainly not leaving a whole lot of room for error there, Tom, but with 6.5 minutes to go, you got to go for it.
Yeah, and that just spells out how the tires are behaving on both of these cars. You can see Gross is pretty composed. He's not working super hard in that car, and it's behaving as such. Maloney is absolutely on the limit, pushing for everything it's worth, and they're getting the same speed out. So the tires on the 28 car, the BMW, are not as happy. Look at him hunting. Danny Gross protecting just a little bit, but then swings back over to the preferred driving line. And closing in on 5 minutes of this one.
I've noticed that the M4 looks really unstable over the bumps at the exit of turn 1. I thought that'd be a bigger issue for the Cayman tonight, but it seems like the M4, at least Maloney's in particular, is very nervous over those bumps at the exit of turn 1, and he's struggling getting power down. He tracks out wide again in turn 3, but he is making speed with it.
The number of laps left, Maloney probably knows how many incident points he's got and how many he can use up by dipping tires like he is, because he's getting pretty liberal with going off the track. Not in a way that's losing him speed, but in ways that it would be racking up those incident points pretty quickly. He's had a very clean race, so that's good that he's now got that resources and he's using them up. Look at the BMW just struggles so much through these S's. He gets a little behind. Gross looks pretty much picture perfect, and now it's almost 2, 3, 4 car lengths gain for Gross exiting the S's.
Ryan Maloney has 5 minutes. Might actually be, yeah, it should be about 5 minutes before he can call this a day. I'm sure he'd like to get one more spot before it's over. No battles elsewhere on the racetrack that you're missing. This is the closest and most dynamic one at the moment. Across the line now, working lap number 54.
Yeah, the only other one that's even close is Andrew Kessel, Colin Daner for 6th. But this one, Ryan Maloney looks super racy. I think if he gets an opportunity, he's absolutely going to pounce, whether or not it's an open door or a cracked door. Coming up on some lap traffic, Benson Ty pulls over to the side and lets both of them get through pretty easily.
Maloney has been taking a lot of, been very liberal with the usage of the track limits, as you mentioned, in turn 3. Doesn't go quite as wide this time through. He is tracking down that Cayman, and you mentioned how ominous it looks. It's also like a dump truck in the mirror. It is enormous. It kind of stands above the Cayman in height and width. It is a formidable foe to the Cayman. That's kind of the dainty, lightweight boxer here tonight.
This is where the Cayman swings back into its own through these rhythmic S's. And luckily for Danny Gross, it's the last major element on Summit Point Raceway, which means he gains a little bit of advantage coming to the start-finish line every single lap. It comes down to a battle between the two that's going to be close.
Here's Francois Brou and Ryan Daner. They're scrapping for position. This is for 9th in class. That's going to get really tight. Daner on the inside, Francois Brou on the outside. Side by side for turn number 3. They're still door to door. Keeping an eye on that other battle we were watching so that it doesn't get too spicy without your eyeballs on it, but this one's the closer one at the moment. 33 should have the preferred line and should be able to complete it, and he does. We're back, of course, to our third place GT4 battle. Maloney lost a little bit of ground this time through. Big moment there. Got too much curve. The car got sideways, and I think he's starting to lose some ground to Danny Gross. Tom, so maybe calm it down, cool the tires off a little bit. You got 3 minutes, a couple laps left to figure this out.
I don't know if that's an option really in the BMW. The way it behaves, it's just kind of the resources are going to be pretty used up after 1.2 hours. We're right on the limit of how much fuel the cars have and how long the tires are designed to last. But somewhere while we were looking away, Francois Brou was able to get back by Ryan Daner. Daner looks to the outside. That's the better line if they're side by side. All things equal. Now they're deep on the brakes. The 33 noses ahead. But now Brou comes back for the apex. They touch and they both go for a spin.
Oh yeah, that was bound to happen eventually. They're both going to climb up on the embankment, and the 33 might get stuck here, and he's going to be beached with only a couple laps to go, and that's got to be a frustrating way to end the race.
It is. I think he actually used a little bit too much of the track on the way in. Turned down on Francois Brou a little bit too much. So at least between the two of them, the driver that started it, not the end of it.
They're both on equal sides of the racetrack here. Does the 33 turn in? Just a little bit too much, I would argue. And loops himself around, takes Francois Brou with them, but they both get beached. And 3 cars also sort of beached in pit lane. Don't know what's going on there, but well, we'll go back to our battle for third. Not convinced this is over just yet.
No,
and there's traffic.
Yeah, the traffic is absolutely the big problem that Danny Gross has and the big opportunity that Ryan Maloney might get. Gross is looking a little weary coming into these slow corners, pushes wide, but then these S's are a gift. Every lap he starts to pull back away, and he's going to intersect these TCR cars just about perfectly. He might get a run towards that final corner. It's going to be really tight. They're going to end up side by side, I think.
Here they come, side by side. There's Murphy Nichols, continues to run third in TCR tonight. A very strong effort, I should add, for Murphy Nichols. Danny Gross is through. Big moment there on the exit. And he's gathered himself some separation. And next time by should be our white flag. Not this time by. Still a minute and 22 seconds remaining.
Jonathan White working his way through the carousel section right now before he gets that white flag. But Maloney is closer. That exchange got a couple of car lengths.
So some shuffling. Jonathan White into turn 5 now. There's actually your first place GT4 driver and second place TCR driver. And Jonathan White has just played all of his cards the right way here tonight and has just not made any major mistakes. Now Ken Halseal, one could argue he didn't make a mistake. He sort of got maybe bullied off track, maybe just a little bit of mutual contact. He found himself 7 seconds back into third place again. Can't pull away because they're less than half a second apart in the thick of some traffic.
They're going to get white flag this time through, so we've got a lap and a half for this one to settle itself out with 2 lapped cars absolutely a factor. 1 GT4, 1 TCR. So a A lot of variables still in this battle between Danny Gross and the Cayman. There he is, and Ryan Maloney in the BMW just behind.
A lot of skipping and hopping through turn 9. Whoa, big moment there for whatever TCR car that was. It's the 24 car, Frank Taberzi. White flag for Jonathan White one more time around here at Summit Point Raceway, but back to third. Going to be a drag race down the front stretch. The gap is 0.2 of a second. Now it's 4. Maloney didn't get a great run.
No, I think both of them didn't really trust what Frank Taberzi was doing, and they both backed off for turn 10. Ryan Maloney might have been able to sling it through there and gain up a little bit, but it was smarter to back off just in case. Now this is the battle for 6th. Andrew Kessel still has a mirror full of Colin Daner in the blue Porsche, so Kessel flickering in and out a little bit with the rainbow on the BMW hood, but we have kind of inverted battles for 3rd and 6th.
Our eye on both of them throughout the rest of this lap. Oh man, the 28 car is getting every little bit of speed that he can. I'm not sure that that was very helpful to his journey forward, though. Remains in 4th, half a second back. Daner, though, is all over Andrew Kessel, and this one could get pretty ugly here at the end. Turn 5, some traffic ahead. Meanwhile, out front, Jonathan White in the 22 car will come out of the final corner, turn number 10. He will win the season finale here in the DC Region SCCA. LaRose in 2nd. Ryan Maloney not able to get back to Danny Gross in 3rd. And Daniel Gross in the number 2 car across the line. Valiant effort. He will hang on at the closing moments of this. Kessel and Daner, though, one more corner between these two with the car ahead of them. This could get spicy for 6th.
Kessel is a little worried about what's going to happen. He's flashing the lights, but he gets a good clean run.
Daner to the line will finish 7th behind Andrew Kessel in 6th. Meanwhile, Christopher Lapras had already, I think he's already come through or is about to come through. No, he actually is the only TCR car that has not gone a second lap down. So while he is still out there racing, everyone else behind him has already taken the checkered flag, meaning Christopher Lapras has officially won this race already. And Ken Halsey will come home 8.6 seconds behind in 2nd place. Murphy Nichols, how about that? 3rd place. I'm sure he's got to be thrilled with how this one went. He's been battling all season long to run up inside the top 5. Finally gets it done here in the closing moments. Let's have a look at our race results, Tom. But Jonathan White and Christopher Lapras getting it done here in GT4 and TCR.
Yeah, you have to wonder what could have been if their other factor in the race was not taken out in the first laps, the first corners, really. But Jonathan White, a perfect performance otherwise to come home ahead of Alex LaRose, who showed flickers of opportunity to catch, but just didn't have the consistency potentially to hold on to Jonathan White. Danny Gross beautifully raced up to 3rd with Ryan Maloney. Kevin Zhu dropping back just a little bit in the middle of that race to end up 5th.
And looking on down to our TCR field, again, Christopher Lapras in the 25, tangling with Ken Halsey in turn 5 earlier in the race. Lapras was able to drive on. Halsey was not able to make up the ground. I think Lapras was the better car today, finished a couple seconds ahead of Ken Halsey. Murphy Nichols grabbing a podium here in the final race of the season. Strong effort for Murphy at his home track. Louis Alessi, 4th place, another great run for him. Peter Lausen brings home a 5th after a couple incidents earlier in the day. Dave Fitzgerald, 6th place, good run for him. And of course, for some of the drivers down here, Daniel Huertas, Tala Sadiq, DJ Alessandrini, of course, with his big off in the opening lap. That was not the race he was looking for, but I think championship-wise, how does that cycle out for DJ?
Well, he pretty much had this one locked up coming in, so I think we can confirm that Alessandrini and Elias Roman, while neither of them took the checkered flag in this race, are both our season champions. Impressive for Christopher Lapras to shift classes, come in and put on that dominant performance over drivers that had been in the field the entire time, as well as Ken Halsey, who's a strong performer everywhere, and that makes it 2 podiums on the season for Murphy Nichols there.
So I'm going to talk to our drivers. We'll talk to them in reverse order. We'll start with the TCR grid. We're going to have now our 3rd place finisher in TCR. That's Murphy Nichols in the number 5. Murphy, congratulations, finally grabbing a podium here at the tail end of the season. A super strong effort, a great battle with, I believe earlier in the race, it was the 35 of Will Robbins that you scrapped with a little bit, but you managed to come out on top. P3's got to feel pretty good.
Absolutely, Kyle. I'm really happy with how I finished tonight. Yeah, Will and I definitely had a battle for 3rd, probably, I don't know, hold on, like about halfway through the race, but I saw he went off a little bit, and I kind of felt bad for him because that was definitely fun, but I felt like there were times when he definitely had the edge over me, and I'm sorry, I'm just lost with words. I'm just really happy with how I finished tonight.
It was a really strong result, and I think this race, Tom and I came in wondering how this track was going to race with 34 TCRs and GT4s. The multi-class interaction was actually pretty calm tonight. We didn't see a lot of bumping and banging between the categories, but it got pretty physical within your own category. A lot of TCR cars having some bumps and bangs. So tell me a little bit about multi-class racing here at Summit Point. I know this is a kind of a home track for you. Tell us a little bit about how it was tonight, kind of with the GT4 cars kind of weaving their way in and out.
For the most part, I felt it was pretty fine. The big thing was areas between 5 and 9, the TCR and the GT4 were about the same pace. So technically a pass could get done, but either the TCR would have to give it up or the GT4 would have to make a huge bomb or dive bomb in between one of the turns. But mainly the big passing points were in between 9 and 10, which even that I felt like wasn't used that much. And then on the front straight going into 1. I did have one incident where I got a little nervous and I felt bad for him because Francois sent it in a little bit too hot, and thank God I saw him out of the corner of my eye, or else I would have taken the corner and I would have been punted off the track with him. But other than that, it felt really calm with the traffic, and I was just able to work with it. I kind of got a little bit lucky, kind of holding Will back, but I was able to just kind of work with traffic and not get screwed over.
A great result for you, a podium finish in that beautifully painted number 5 car, I should add. So it looked good out there. Congratulations, and we'll see you next season here for the DC Region Virtual Racing League.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, and the boss, the owner of Smoketown was watching the race too. I know he's proud.
Awesome. It was a great run for you, Murphy. Congratulations. We'll talk to you next time.
See you guys.
I didn't mean to pull him out that quick. We're going to move on now to Ken House-Seal, who finished in 2nd in TCR. Battling for the race lead, got a bit of a nudge off course, ended up 6.5 seconds behind Christopher Lapras. Ken, I know you wanted to fight up there at the front, but a bit of a touch to talk to us about the contact and trying to run down Lapras again. Weren't able to get there, but walk us through the process.
Yeah, that was fun. I was trying to lose him when I was ahead and then couldn't really, so backed off a little bit, and then we ended up together. I have to go back and look and see what happened in the incident, but yeah, I just went off into the grass and then had some damage. Both sides of the car were missing some paint, so that kind of sucked. But the car just got a little pushy towards the end and just couldn't really have the pace. So turned out okay. I think Lapras was probably a little faster tonight, but had a lot of fun.
A lot of drivers sort of stuck with the same car through most of the year, and we saw a few drivers sort of switch and jump ship to the other category this week. How much of an adjustment is it to go from one to the other for just 1 week at a track as technical as Summit Point?
I mean, it's been a couple weeks since I drove the GT4 cars, and Summit Point I know pretty well, and I've driven the TCR a bunch. It's definitely different. You gotta get used to the rear end of the car waggling all over the place and trying to use that to make it turn. So definitely different. I struggled for 5-10 laps in practice, but then I think I was pretty good.
Well, Ken, a 2nd place result, nothing to hang your helmet over. Congratulations. That was a pretty strong run for you in that number 23 Valvoline Audi. We'll see you next time here on SimTV.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Move on now to our race winner in TCR. It was Christopher Lapras in the 25. We just talked to Ken about the little bit of contact. Quite a bit of side-to-side contact throughout the TCR field. Just the slightest of nudges gave you a pretty sizable gap, and you were able to extend it to the rest of the race. You led the majority of it and came home as the race winner. Talk us through your view of all the incidents that happened around you and then with you and Ken before you just drove away and took the win.
Yeah, I got to look at the replay. I'm not even sure what happened in the car, so I don't know if it was our contact that made him go off or if he got tied up with GT4 cars as well. But that's unfortunate. I was really looking forward to seeing how it plays out. TCR is kind of fun. You don't got to manage it, but it's a fun class to race.
Well, tonight, the multi-class interaction between the GT4 and TCRs, we were expecting it to be a little bit messier. Were you surprised at how little incidents there seemed to be between the two categories? We saw a lot of issues in the classes themselves, but not between the two. Is that surprising to you, or is that how you thought it would go?
It's a little surprising. Honestly, the cars aren't that much different anywhere on this track besides the last 2 turns in the straightaway, like through the S's and the majority of the turns, they're pretty even.
Well, it was a really strong run for you. Just drove away from Ken in the closing laps. Were able to expertly negotiate that traffic. Congratulations, Chris, and thanks for talking to us. We'll see you next season.
Thank you, guys. It was a ton of fun.
Move on now to our GT4 category. We talked to Danny Gross in the number 2 car in the Porsche Cayman. A long, hard-fought fight with Ryan Maloney and Kevin Zhu that you came out on top of, Danny. But to come home on podium's got to feel pretty good there after that fight you had.
Yeah, no, it was great. I going into the race, I don't know what happened. Something happened turn 3, I think, with DJ, and not sure how that happened, but the second I saw that, I was like, wow, this race just blew wide open. Kevin, he's fast. I think I was behind him initially. And then, him and Ryan started scrapping, and I just kind of sat behind him for the longest time, just kind of thinking to myself, all right, these BMWs are supposed to fall off, right? And luckily, I got around them, I think, turn 1, and knew I just had to minimize mistakes from there.
Danny, congratulations. It was a strong run. We're actually watching a very scary moment with you working through some traffic. So a really strong run for you, and great job peeling your way through traffic in a car that really had advantages in the wrong part of the racetrack. So congratulations on that, and we'll talk to you next season.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. Love the stream.
Appreciate it, Danny. We'll see you next time. Move on now to Alex LaRose, who came home in second place in the number 26 car. We were just talking to Danny Gross, who told us that the race blew wide open after Alessandrini found a tire barrier on the opening lap. An opportunity for sure. Weren't quite able to capitalize and grab a race victory away from Jonathan White, but still ran a very strong race, kept him within your sights the whole night. Tell us about your excursion up at the front.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was a little bit bummed to see DJ go into the barriers early on, but that did open up an opportunity to chase down John. But he had crazy pace tonight. I feel like every single time he was making mistakes, I was also making mistakes. So I think we held the gap pretty constant the whole race, and I just couldn't close it. But yeah, awesome race for Jonathan. And yeah, it was a good race.
Lots of TCR cars out there tonight. One of the biggest TCR fields we've had all season. What was your experience like getting through the traffic? We didn't see a lot of incidents tonight between the two categories. What was your view out the windshield?
Yeah, I think for the most part, everyone was pretty courteous. A lot of good communication for telling us where to pass, and really no major issues. It was really awesome racing with all these guys.
Well, a super strong season for you, Alex. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us this season. A relatively new entrant. Hope to see you back next time around, and see if you can be on the other side of the winning battle next time we visit Summit Point.
Thanks, Kyle.
On now to Jonathan White in the number 22 car, and the contact on the opening lap between DJ Alessandrini and yourself, Jonathan, kind of as Danny Gross said, kind of blew the race wide open. But for Alex LaRose, he wasn't able to pounce on that chance, and you just sort of drove away, keeping him behind you and taking your time through traffic. Take us through your night, because you saw a whole lot out the windshield and not a lot in the mirror.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get into DJ on that lap 1 there. I mean, we went through the replay just now, me, him, and Kevin, and it seems like we were getting into each other. Or, I mean, I was getting into him, I guess. I think I should have backed off a bit more than I did. Mistake on my part. But, yeah, aside from that, it was a pretty uneventful night. I think Alex did have the pace, but I'm not really sure what happened with him tonight. Maybe he was struggling with, like, some... I don't know. Maybe he just couldn't succumb to the pressure or something. But anyway, it wasn't a bad night. Uneventful, but still fun.
Uneventful night for sure, but you managed to come home with a race victory after 58 laps of racing. Jonathan, congratulations on that win. Well earned, hard fought, and we'll see you next time here.
Yeah.
It's going to wrap things up here tonight, Tom. We just watched 58 laps of racing at Summit Point. It's like race cars in a blender here at times, but remarkably clean and solid racing throughout the entire field.
Yeah, it reminds me of coming into Donington. We didn't expect it to be chaos, and it was. This one we expected to have all the underpinnings of what could become chaos, and these guys handled it like absolute professionals. So couldn't be a better finish to the 2020 winter season for the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. And I have one question for Dave Fitzgerald. When's the next one start?
I don't know yet. I actually asked the other day because I was curious, but we don't know yet. But make sure that you're following SimTV here on YouTube. You can join our Discord community and by proxy get in touch with the DC Region Virtual Racing League community. You can also head to the website for the Virtual Racing League on the Washington, DC region page and follow their Facebook page for more information. That's going to do it for us tonight. The next stream that you're going to see here on SimTV is actually going to be tomorrow night, the conclusion of the Scars Ferrari Challenge from Sebring International. That'll be tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern. Thanks so much for watching and joining us here on SimTV. We'll see you next time for, I guess, the next time with this group, or at least parts of this group, will be the Spec MX-5 Sim Racing Challenge that will happen in the spring. So we'll see you there on SimTV. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.